What's going on, gentlemen?
Good evening. We are just getting set up.
Can't believe that there's going to be 2 outdoor hockey games in my state of Florida. I don't know how
I
know one.
I don't. I don't know how they're gonna pull that off.
Neither do I.
Me either.
I heard of one, but what's the other?
No, they were just showing highlights when it was in Buffalo, because Dustin's a Buffalo Bills fan. When Sidney Crosby had scored in the shootout or the overtime in the snow, so that was cool.
Right.
That's definitely not going to happen in Florida, but it was kind of cool to see the snow. So
Hey,
yeah,
it's how it
No,
happened.
they've been chasing that Buffalo Pittsburgh game since that happened. I mean, that was just magical to have it snowing. It looked like a snow globe. It was a great game. You know, they've had snowy games since then, but it's always just been there haven't been super competitive games. So
yeah.
Detroit and Toronto. That was 2014. That one had some snow.
Yeah.
And in Comerica. Oh, I know what I came over here for.
I was at the Lightning Nashville game a couple of years ago. There was no snow, but it was cold. It was kind of cool to be. It's just different when you see hockey outdoors compared to indoors.
Obviously, yeah.
It's cool, so cool to see it outdoors. But Alex, if you have questions for Dustin, go right ahead. But I'll give you the floor.
Yeah.
Justin, what's up, man?
All right.
Oh, look, you want to? I got to. Justin, it's Alex over here in New York. My buddy Brad's and these guys. Obviously, Adam and Lou. How's it going, man?
Good. How's it going with you, man?
Good. So as far as fantasy football, I want to take your brain real quick. I'm in a dynasty like a keeper.
Okay.
What were your takeaways from this year as far as, you know, everyone considered on like any GM and fantasy or non-fantasy, everyone wants the best players, right? But what were some of the guys that really stood out to you that were like off the radar that you were able to get, or that you kind of told your readers about being the fantasy guru here? What were some of the players that really stood out to you this year that were kind of under the radar that really were very well accomplished and that had big seasons to you?
Yeah, I was really big on Bucky Irving coming into the season.
Yeah.
I'm a situation over talent person. So I looked at Rachaad White and how inefficient he was 2 years ago. And it's funny because one of my best friends were in a dynasty league, and he was like, wanted to trade me Rachaad White, and he wanted a second-round pick, and I said, no, I'll give you a third.
Oh,
and
wow.
I said to him, I'll give you a third, and if they don't draft a guy in the top 4 rounds, we'll make it a second. We'll like do a pick swap, conditional trade. And he was like, no, because I knew they were going to draft someone. So when they took Bucky Irving, who was good in college, not great, but like the situation just lined up for him, I was telling people, I told someone, I was on a podcast before the season, I said, mid-season, you won't be able to trade Rachaad White for Bucky Irving. I was like, no way, but, you know, Rachaad White's the guy. He's got a ton of volume. I said, listen, he's inefficient. He averaged like 3.8 yards. He was really bad at like run blocking. I said, they're just going to work Bucky Irving in. And that's what happened. So when I'm looking at guys for next year, and even at the end of this year, like, what situations are projected to be good next year? So Jalen McMillan for Tampa Bay, he really came on because, right, they had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Cade Otton, and then obviously things picked up. So I don't expect Tampa to sign Chris Godwin this offseason. So I think Jalen McMillan's someone I'm looking to maintain that role and have a bigger role next year, because it's probably Mike Evans' last year if he stays around for another year. McMillan sticks around as the wide receiver too. I think Cade Otton coming back helps him. And if you look at Cade Otton, I was down on him after midseason because he had a really great stretch when Evans and Godwin went out and McMillan was hurt. People were like, "Oh, Cade Otton's a top 5 tight end." I was like, "No, he's not. He's got bad matchups coming up. He's just not getting, like, his volume is okay, but he's just not getting he's not getting a ton of volume, and he's not actually like, you can get all the targets you want if you're not catching them." So you saw after McMillan came back, the volume for Otton and the production went down. So I think McMillan's a big one. Rachaad White, being bad, I knew that. So Bucky Irving was a big one. I was really high on Darnell Mooney coming into the season. I think he was doing well until he got hurt, just because, again, situation was, who else you got? Kyle Pitts has never been good. I've never been a Kyle Pitts believer. You have Drake London. You have Kirk Cousins, who, can focus on a second wide receiver. So I was happy with Darnell Mooney, getting him super duper late because, he had kind of burnt people in Chicago and went to a different situation. So those are probably the three guys I was, two guys I was high on, and or I guess three guys I was high on and being down on KDOT and in mid-season. So that's why I always look at situation, because when you're talking about, I always say once is a fluke, twice is a trend, three times a pattern. When you get a pattern of players being bad or good, then I think you can really make hay, playing off that. So I'm curious to see what happens with Marvin Mims for the rest of this, if they, this playoff game, and what happens next season, because I've been down on Marvin Mims since they drafted him, and he's played really well the past few weeks. So if he can continue that role, if Denver doesn't bring in another wide receiver next year, in the draft or free agency, I'll be drafting a ton of Marvin Mims next season.
Exactly. Yeah, I like how you pointed that out. It's it's not just about, this player is ranked 1, 2, 3. You got to look for trends, like you said. The Jacksonville receiver, the rookie, Trevor Lawrence, needed at number 1. He slotted in. Now I'm looking at the rankings now. He's ranked the 10th overall player in fantasy football for next year. And who, that type of rookie might go like 7th or 8th round. I was just telling the guys about that. I know Adam on the video now, he's gotten into fantasy. It's so much fun. And it's like you said, a big key to success is identifying those players where you can draft them later and let everyone else chase to kind of big established names. You're going to win the championships in your leagues, Adam, when you identify like rookies that are coming in, like Genty next year. Watch where he gets drafted. He could right away. He could be a top 3 or 4 player.
And so what I look for this year, so we're like looking towards next season, I'm looking at situations over players. So if you look 2 years ago at the combine in the draft, everyone was talking about Michael Mayer, Tucker Kraft, Sam Laporta, and there's another guy. Yeah, and then I told people whoever the Lions get at tight end is going to be successful, because they had TJ Hockenson, who was successful. They traded away Hockenson, and after they traded away Hockenson, the group of 3 tight ends they had, Silstra and Brock Wright, they had 8 touchdowns. So that system favored the tight end. So I told people, whoever goes to Detroit, whether that's a free agent, which I was hoping would be Mike Gesicki, or I said whichever rookie goes there, that's who's going to be my top tight end. Like, that's going to be a tight end environment. And although Michael Mayer and Tucker Kraft were probably the better prospects, and they went, roughly the same, draft capital. I mean, within a couple picks, 10 picks of each other. I said Sam Laporta is going to be good because of the way the system in Detroit was set up. And we've seen Sam Laporta be very, very good. And Michael Mayer has not been good. So they drafted Brock Bowers. Now Michael Mayer, who is a gifted athlete and a gifted tight end, just isn't used well. So that's what I'm looking at for next year, is what teams and systems. So whoever goes to Dallas, which we thought this would happen last year, everyone said all free agency. Dallas needs to sign a running back. Didn't happen. Dallas needs to draft a running back. Didn't happen. But then everybody was like, oh, well, Rico Dowdle is not going to be good. I'm like, how can you say that they need to draft a guy because they have a great offensive line and they're a run-heavy team, and then not like the guy that's just left there because he's left there? Clearly, Dallas favored Rico Dowdle over the draft picks or the free agents. So to me, like, Rico Dowdle, like, that's a system, and now Rico Dowdle's a free agent. So whoever Dallas gets as their running back, and they may retread a Najee Harris. They may bring in someone who's less of a bigger name. Do I think Dallas should go get Gentry? Probably, but they may go sign a Najee Harris, and people will drop Najee Harris down because he's not the sexy name. And I think Najee Harris is going to be really good if he were to go to Dallas.
I was shocked.
So again, it's like situation. It's situation over players, because Kyle Pitts is the perfect example. Talented athlete, great numbers in college. The situation just isn't there. Kenny Galladay was great with the Lions. Athletic guy, talented. Yeah, went to New York and sucked because the system wasn't there. Like, they didn't have a good quarterback. It just wasn't a good system. Yeah. So we see that time and time again where these players come in. Look at Sam Darnold. Not good. Goes to Minnesota because they have a better system. Favored him, and now he's doing really well. So system matters more than anything else for me in college over draft capital or college production or athletic score. I think those all play a part in it, but I'm looking at system more than anything else.
Yeah. Jacksonville and Bucky Irving landing in Tampa. Like you said, that was ideal because Rachaad White's he's kind of a body. I root for everyone to succeed, but he doesn't blow you away on game days or in the film room. White was kind of like he was maybe a mid-round draft pick. Tampa was never in love with him. So when Bucky came there, that's a mid-round or later round pick and now next year it's his job.
It's his job.
You have the rights to that player now, and he's he could be a top 10 player right away next year. That'd be a brilliant pick in fantasy.
It would be.
And right, if Benjamin had went there, or Jonathan Brooks, if he would have stayed out, like if any of these other running backs would have went there, I would have felt the same way, because that opportunity was there, because there wasn't the system. They're going to run the ball a ton, and you just need you need to be a capable running back to take advantage of it. Now, we do see times where you get a tight end or a running back in a good system and they're just not that good, and that's where talent shows. But if you're trying to split hairs, realistically, the difference between Saquon Barkley and Bucky Irvin talent-wise is minimal. Honestly, like it's 5%. But when you talk about offensive line coaching and scheme, that can be a 15% difference. So when you're talking about production-wise, that's where you got to look at it. If you're talking about a guy that can go and get 10 carries a game versus 15 carries a game, those 5 carries is huge. And that's where talent does win out. But I'll take a guy who's going to get 15 carries. I'll take a lesser talented guy who's going to get 15 carries with a good offensive line over a more talented guy who's going to get 10 carries and a subpar or an okay offensive line.
Yeah, Xavier Worthy, Chiefs #1 pick. Everyone's saying, he could be the new Tyreek Hill. So he was a fantasy darling. I moved up. I drafted him pretty early, guys. Worthy was kind of not the best situation, though, in hindsight, because they had all these different receivers and running backs. It's musical chairs. And Mahomes, everyone knows, Andy Reid and Mahomes, they'll spread it out to 10 different guys on game day and win. So they're not a fantasy hotbed. But then like a Ladd McConkey or Brock Bowers, a tight end, a rookie catching 100 passes, like you said, it's opportunity, where they're getting drafted, who they're being coached up by, and who their teams are, really, the system and the situation. That's what I got, man. I like that intel.
If you look at the end of the first round, you had, and the start of the second round, you had Xavier Worthy, Ricky Pearsall, Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette. Yeah. Like all those guys were drafted, and if you looked at it, Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman were set to have the best impact right away because there was an opportunity. I loved Ricky Pearsall as a player, but he went to a system where it's like you're going to be behind Debo and Ayuk and Kittle and McCaffrey catching passes. So like the system wasn't great for this year. Now next year I think it'll be better, because who knows if Debo comes back, and they signed Ayuk, but Kittle's getting older. So same thing with Jackson Smith and Jigba last year. He was the top wide receiver in that draft class, goes to Seattle, and everyone went, well, he's the most talented guy. I go, yeah, but you still have Lockett, you still have Metcalf. So it took a year for JSN to break out, and this year we've seen him take over. So I'm looking at guys like Pearsall and going, okay, can I get him at a discount for 2025? Because people had high expectations in 2024, but the system and the opportunity wasn't there, but it's going to be there in the future. So that's how I look at it.
Right.
Got to be able to forecast kind of what you can envision them doing in that system. That's kind of staying one step ahead of the competition. Who's just looking at the rankings. You got to look a little deeper if you want to win those titles, because
you got to look deeper. That's really where you win. You can't win your league in the first 5 rounds. You can certainly lose it by taking the wrong guy, but you win it deep in draft when you get a Bucky Irving, when you get a Jonnu Smith, when you get guys like that, when systems change and they get a bigger opportunity. I mean, Mike Gesicki, Cincinnati had never really used a tight end a ton, historically. And all of a sudden they bring in Mike Gesicki. Now they've brought in other guys. They brought in Irv Smith last year and the year before. And they've always brought in these like talented guys who are bottom of that middle group. And all of a sudden they get a new offensive coordinator, and then the offense shifts. And now Mike Gesicki gets 70 targets, which is more than I think any tight end in Cincinnati has ever had. I think the highest is 65 when they had Eifert back in the day. So I'm looking at Eric All. Now Gesicki's a free agent. They drafted Eric All, I think, in the 3rd or 4th round. Was doing pretty well, got hurt. I'm stashing him everywhere I can get right now, cheap, because people are going, who? And you go, you can just get him as a throw-in. So you can go out and make a trade for, if I can go out and make a trade for McMillan and go, I'll give you a second, I'll give you a third for McMillan. And I go, why don't you throw in Eric All, and they're okay, sure, right? And I'll take that and take those 2 players and stash them. And I think you're right. Draft picks, values get overinflated as we get closer to the draft, because people get enamored with the hype and the names, and the combine will happen and people will be so excited about some guy running a fast 40. Like Xavier Worthy, I thought was I thought Xavier Worthy was good, not great. Like, he's fast. He's real skinny. Super duper skinny. So I'm worried that he won't hold up. But you knew he was going to get 2 or 3 touches a game on, jet sweeps or screens, and they're going to utilize the speed. It's just a matter of if he can capitalize. First game he comes out, has 2 touchdowns, and then doesn't have a touchdown for like 4 more weeks. So it's just that right. Opportunity there wasn't huge for him. Whereas if Xavier Worthy was on, if you swap Xavier Worthy for Ricky Pearsall, I think he has a bigger impact. If you swap Xavier Worthy and put him on Carolina, I think he has a huge impact. If you put him on the Bills, I think he has a big impact. I think he got. Yes, it's a better team, but it's not the better opportunity.
Yeah, it sets it apart from other like fantasy baseball and fantasy basketball. Isn't as reliant. Football collectively, the team element of the sport is more important for fantasy because you just got to get into the right system. But yeah, let's open it up, man. I had those couple of points, but it's good having you on, man. Some really good insight.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I always take a different approach, and I finish top 5 pretty much every year. I take quarterback first. My first pick is always quarterback because quarterback's going to play pretty much every game. And you're going to get consistent points out of quarterback. And especially if you're not drafting the first 3 to 5 picks. Take quarterback number 1. And then I've got my quarterback set, and then I can look for value in some of the, because Chase and McCaffrey are going to be gone in the first 3 to 5 picks. And so I have this terrible tendency to draft in the later picks. So I want to get a quarterback off the board first, and then build out from there.
Yeah, it's not a bet. It's all about how you are at drafting. If you can identify late round running backs and wide receivers, it makes sense. Because if you look at the number 3 quarterback this year was Baker Mayfield, 448 points by the scoring I look at for my basic scoring, compared to the 10th guy, 339 points. You're talking almost 100-point difference between 3 to 10. Whereas if you look at wide receiver, 3 was Jefferson, 317. 10 was Garrett Wilson, 252. So only a 50-point difference, right? So that's a huge difference in terms of points per game, points per week. And so if you can go out and if you look at the top 10 wide receivers, Brian Thomas wasn't expected to be there. Drake London was talked about, but not as number 5. People thought maybe Neighbors. He finished. McLaurin wasn't expected to be there. Jackson Smith and Jigba wasn't expected to be there. Garrett Wilson wasn't really expected. I mean, Cortland Sutton at 11 at 242 points. Like, that's a huge value when you're getting those guys in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. Like,
right.
I don't know what his ADP was, but Cortland Sutton's ADP was super low. And right, knew it was a good situation for him. You just was Bo Nix the guy, and it's like it didn't matter. He can be a bad quarterback, but he's the only thing to throw to there. So
automatic volume.
Yeah.
And then Bo Nix turns into what Bo Nix was this year, and so you feel really good about yourself. I drafted Brock Bowers in I think the 6th round.
Yeah.
And because all the other tight ends were gone, I was like, well, I need a tight end. Because I drafted some receivers, I got my defense, I got a kicker. So I felt comfortable with my shell. I was like, now just to plug holes. So I ended up drafting Brock Bowers, and he turned into a really nice piece this year.
Yeah, I mean, he did great, especially once they traded Devontae Adams. I mean, his volume spiked a ton. So I think that was always my fear with him was like, you have Devontae Adams, you don't know who the quarterback is, but they got rid of Devontae Adams, and all of a sudden Brock Bowers is getting, I think he only had
10 targets.
Yeah, I mean, he had 2 games at 5 targets, after Adams. Before Adams, he was 3, 4, 9, and 8. So, I mean, you're looking at 5, 6 targets for a tight end. It's huge, and you're getting games with 13, 14, 16 targets. Like, you're massive there. So, again, tight ends one of those things. Tight ends and quarterbacks, because they're a one position, you can if you don't get one of the top guys, then you might as well just wait till the end because, like I said with quarterbacks, right, the difference between 3 and 10 is 100 points, but the difference between 10 and 10 was Kyler at 339. So to get to 100 points different from that, you're looking at Bryce Young. Like, you could have got Bryce Young for free. You're talking. Let me know how many down that is.
Good.
All personal preference. That's the beauty of it.
You know, I think I finished second a couple of years ago. I finished second in the league, and I had my kicker and my defense steal me 3 games.
Yeah,
because they had. So I'm always the first one to take defense off the board. I'll take defense. I'll get in the 4th round. I'm looking around. I'm like, yeah, there's some value in receiver. There's some value on running back, but I'm looking at like if I wait 3 rounds to take that D, they may not be there. They may already be gone. I'm gonna go ahead and pop early because like the number 1 defense versus like if you have the 18th running back, and the 22nd running back are going to be about 5 to 10 points.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go and take that defense that's going to score me 10 points a week.
Yep.
Every week, and be super consistent all year, as opposed to taking a flyer on a running back who, yeah, he might pop off for 21 week, but he's going to average 7 points.
Yep. That's part of being that's part of roster management is how you build your team and what guys are your consistent guys that are going to get you consistent when you count on, what guys kind of have those big spike weeks. And if you can project those, at a fairly good accuracy, you're going to win out. So if you picked up someone, let's take a Ray McLeod who, averages you 5 points a week. But if you can start him in the weeks he has 12, a 13 week, a 16-point week, 12, 11-point week, if you can get him double his normal production and you picked him off of waivers, but you can just start him on good matchups, that's where the in-season, and I think that's where you'll always have lucky managers, right? You'll always have the guy who doesn't pay attention, who just follows the rankings, who does well because he's going off the consensus, which is all experts based. And I think we always say this, like making the playoffs is the luck of fantasy football. Winning in the playoffs is where the skill comes in because that's where that management and right. And some of that is like that game management and predicting which guys are going to be good and making the right lineup changes is where it's at. And I've had seasons where I've made all the right lineup changes and still not won, but it's like, man, I did everything I could. I just got lucked out. Like I started the best lineup I could every week. And I just got beat because he had more points than me. It's nothing I can do about that. I did the best I could with what I had.
You did better than I did. So that's a big reason in itself because I tried fantasy, but I don't know. I got somewhere lost and I couldn't find. I mean, I did it for a year with my brother. Like we just bombed out completely.
Yeah.
I think another big factor, man, to success for like trying to strive for a championship in these leagues is just as important as draft day. Like you touched upon it a little bit briefly. The in-season acquisitions is crucial, whether or not you have a salary cap or not. But picking up a guy like you've already mentioned a few, but like a Ray McLeod, that's a prototypical. That's the perfect case of like that's a waiver type gem. Where you can pick him up for the right week, you can win that in the week 14 and suddenly, advance into the playoffs.
Yeah,
those are sometimes league-winning moves just appear the later you get in the year.
And here's where it is: like if you drafted Bucky Irving in like the 18th round and just had him as your last guy on your bench, and you stashed him for a couple weeks, then all of a sudden, he pops up and people are like, "Oh, I need to go get him off waivers." He's already on your team. You don't have to worry about it. I mean, Bucky Irving had 9 points, 2 points, 11 points in week 3, 12 in week 4. That's when people were like, oh, maybe we should pick this guy up. And then it was 5 points, and then he went 18, 16, 15 in 6, 7, 8. And people were like, oh, we definitely need to pick him up. 6 points in week 9, 17 points in week 10. And then from there on out from the bye, 27, 27, 2, 13, 18, 23, and then 16. So people were going, after 6, 7, 8, they were going, we should probably pick up this guy. And you're going, I already have him. Like, I don't need to worry about it.
Either that, or you can throw them out there as trade bait because you might have a receiver that's down, you might have a running back that's down, and you want to add a running back. Jesus Christ, who gave me a speaky job? I'm also a big fan of having multiple players at every position so I can cover buys. I found that I win more games when I have bench depth at quarterback and quarterback, receiver, and running back. I try to make my picks based on who's the best and when they have their bye, so that I can always have a full lineup card.
Yeah,
and
I agree. I mean, depth is huge for fantasy football because you get a lot of people who just load up on top talent and trade away all their depth. And, they've got, they might have Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs, but then bye week happens and they're starting, Ray Davis, who's, going to put up 2 points. It's like the drop off is huge. I'd rather if you want to go 2 guys that are going to get you, 20 points every week, and then all of a sudden your drop off is from 2 to 5. That's not a good. I want to drop off from 20 to. I'll take 15 every week and drop off to 10 and not have that much variance. But again, it's all about what's the style you want to play with, and I think that's what's fun about fantasy is everybody's going to play style. I'm risk adverse, so I'll take a lot more consistent players with higher floors, lower ceilings. I know people who like playing those like. They want the MVS guys who are just these big boom bust guys. Like they want that. I'm like, I'm good. Like I don't want to try to play the games of when he starts good. I'll take someone who's just going to get me 7-8 points every week versus an MVS that's either going to get me 20 or 0. Again, but that's just me, and it depends on how you want to do it. And there's people, I've always tell people fantasy is meant to be fun, and whatever fun is for you. If winning is fun, that's what you should do. If trading is fun, that's what. If trash talking is fun. Like then make that your focal point, and winning it does make it fun, but it can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be necessarily winning. And I think there's lots of people that don't win, and they're like, "I didn't win." It's like, yeah, but did you come in to win?
It's the whole process. It's the journey.
Yeah,
it's actually the journey.
Yeah,
camaraderie of being in the league where you're talking some junk here and there, or catching up with old friends, and then it just involves. It maximizes the appreciation for every game you're watching on Sundays and Mondays. And whatever nights. Oh, I got that player. Oh, I'm going against that defense. Oh shoot, my opponent has that player. So it just adds another spice. It adds more spice to the dish. Any dish, any game has a little bit more oomph to it.
And people that get in these that are playing in 40 leagues, it's like, yeah, but you don't care about them, so it's not impactful. And play people who play in public, I know people who are like, oh, you want to join my league? I know no one in your league. I don't want to join your league because I don't know anybody. I don't need nameless face. I want to play with people I know and I can trash talk. I don't want to trash talk someone of them and get offended because I said something that crosses the line because I wasn't trying to, but they're just sensitive. I don't know. For me, it's about fun. It's about the community. That's why I love doing some of these other things. I'm not a huge bettor, but that's why people like to bet because it's not they like to bet. It's they like to have some sort of stakes in every game. So having stakes in the game is fun. And that's why there's, I'm in a couple playoff challenges. I do a couple other things on the side that are just fun things to do. As fun additions to fantasy football that just make every game a little more interesting.
For your top 3 and way too early, I guess. Maybe top, I would say 3 or 5. But thinking just purely fantasy under the fantasy microscope. Who do you have? Jamar Chase, Barkley? Who would be your top 3?
I think next year
you're drafting right now for next year, top 3.
So Chase is interesting because it depends on if T. Higgins comes back. If T. Higgins doesn't come back, I'm not sure I have Chase 1 because I think that affects him a little bit. I still have Amon-Ra St. Brown as 1. I've always had him as my wide receiver 1 over Chase.
Line player.
Yeah,
I think he's just got the talents, the consistency of coaching. Now they may lose Ben Johnson, but I don't think that matters a ton. The consistency in quarterback play, having Jameson Williams across from him, having the running backs. I just don't see a lot in there. He's probably 1. If wide receivers, I still think you put Chase in the top 5. CeeDee Lamb should be there. Puka, I think, is in the top 5. And then Jefferson has to be in the top 5 for wide receivers. Running back's going to be interesting. It depends on what the Jets do at quarterback. I could see Breece Hall being a sneaky top 5 guy who I think is not going to be there. But obviously, I think Barkley and Henry are going to be the top 2 guys for running back. Just, everyone discounted them because of their age. I think they're going to come back out. Now, Henry, I'm a little worried about, and Barkley because there is a ton of carries and workload on them. Henry had 325 rushing attempts and 19 receptions. So he's close to that 350 number, which is never good. Barkley's at over 350. So I might just shy away from them and take a Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs. For Dynasty, I've always said Jahmyr Gibbs is the RB1. I think he's got the talent. I think he's got the team around him. I think he's really good. And then I think if he stays healthy, I think Isaiah Pacheco can really be a force on Kansas City. I think he's going to get drafted in that RB10 range. But Kelsey's getting another year. I mean, Mahomes is still going to be good, but they're shifting that offense in Kansas City to be more run heavy and run first. But we still have a long way. I mean, we got free agency in the draft, which could change a lot of things. But I mean, Pacheco is just the way he runs and the style he plays. I mean, he was RB15 last year on 14 games with 7 touchdowns. Now this year he was hurt a ton of it, but you look at the first 2 weeks, 15 points, 16 points, gets hurt, comes back and plays minimal because he's hurt. I think if he would have continued on that pace of 15, 16 points a game, he's right up there with Barkley and Henry. The injury just slowed him down. So, yeah, I mean, he's got
like you said, Reed loves him too. He's becoming an absolute warhorse. A workhorse.
Yeah, I mean, and he got 15 carries and then 19 carries. So it's not like he's not getting the carries. I mean, Henry was getting, 13 plus a game. So I don't think Pacheco will ever see the 20 plus carries that, sometimes Henry and Barkley sees, but he doesn't need to. He's so much more efficient that I think he can do it without it. He had looks like he had one game last year where one game at 20, one game at 19, and a couple at 18 carries. So he's not going to see the 25 carries, but you don't need to when you're rushing for 4.5 yards a game compared to Henry. Henry is what's his rushing at this year? He's at 5.9 this year, which is absolutely insane. He was at 4.7 or 4.1 the year before. Derrick Henry should be in the 4.5 yards per carry, but Pacheco can do just as much with limited carry as Derrick Henry. So,
and Barkley with his yards per game now. Now he's running behind just an awesome offensive line after running for the Giants for half a decade. Like, he's free now. Now he can really put up numbers. But you're right. He's a little bit more wear and tear on the tire. So you definitely you're taking Gibbs, and would you take Bijan over Barkley?
Yeah, I'd probably take them. I wouldn't take them over those guys. That's where I would try to trade back. So if I'm in a league where I can trade the pick, so if I'm at the 103, and let's say let's say Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamar Chase go, and let's say I'm at 104. So let's say it starts out Chase, Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm at the 104. I try to trade back to 106, maybe pick up another pick. Or something and go, okay, cool. I'll trade back and we'll, let's trade. I'll trade my 104 for, your 106 and we'll swap 4th rounders, right? So take your 407 or whatever it is for my 409, right? And you just kind of move up in later round and move back. And then you can kind of go, okay, and let them take the Bijans and the Derrick Henry Saquon. And you go, okay, cool. I'll settle for a Bijan at 406 versus taking a Barkley at 104.
Yeah, that's always been my philosophy as to really if I'm not the first overall pick where I can pick anybody I want, I always start with quarterback. I'm going to get a quarterback off the board so that because he's going to give you. I generally want a quarterback that's going to score 20 points a game.
Yeah.
I went to the Jets.
Well, that's why we don't draft Jets quarterbacks.
Well, that's their mistake. They always go for the top quarterback. They need a running back. They need a fullback. They need everything. But they just keep going for the quarterback because he has the best ones to help them in the game. It's not always the case. So they got to look for all-around players too, not just a quarterback. That's their biggest problem.
Once Jefferson and Chase and Amon-Ra are gone, guys that you expect to score between 25 and 40 points a week, it's a crapshoot after that. It's kind of it becomes a guessing game.
Yeah.
And so I always want to look for players, and I think that the O-lines are super underrated in fantasy football.
They are, and so I think that's like when we talk about free agency, like what does that look like for O-line? So if you're looking at the Eagles, I'm looking at it right now. Mekhi Becton's a free agent.
Probably get re-signed.
Clark's a free agent, but he's a backup. They don't have anybody on their Fred Johnson, I think, is a backup, is a free agent. They're not losing anybody in their offensive line. Let's see what's happening with the Ravens here. Doesn't mean the Eagles can't make anything, but Ravens got Ronnie Stanley's a free agent. He's definitely a starter. Patrick Card, who's a fullback, who's not a line but similar, is a free agent. Josh Jones I think is a starter. He's a free agent. And I think that's it. So if the Ravens lose 2 pieces or even 1 piece on that offensive line and the Eagles don't, I think that's enough to put Barkley over Henry. And I think if you're looking at the Lions retaining all their offensive line, I have to look and see what's going on with them. But that's where I start looking at it. And I think that's where free agency really matters because, here you go. Dan Skipper, who's their 7th offensive line free agent for the Lions. Kevin Zeitler's been playing for him. He's a free agent, but we knew he was going to be a free agent. They got a couple other guys that are backups that are all going to be free agents. So the Lions could roll into next year with the same team they have this year. So when I'm evaluating players, I always look at like how many hurdles do they have to get over to be the top guy. So, or how many red flags or question marks are there? So if you give me 2 guys that are similar talent, but one guy's got a new offensive line, I'll take the guy who doesn't have a new offensive line. If you give me a wide receiver who has the same quarterback, same offensive coordinator, same coach, versus a guy that has a new quarterback, new coordinator, I'll take the consistency because that's just another hurdle they have to get over to reach their true potential. And so that's how I'm always looking at guys, is like how many things they have to hurdle to get to their true potential. Some guys, there's just too many. It's just like that's too big of a hurdle, and there's too many of them, and they won't reach it.
Brian, what are your thoughts on your power?
What, like taking Amon Ra? Like you might steer, like, because if Ben Johnson goes, and it'll kind of depend on who. It might move the needle to if he ends up in Chicago.
Yeah.
You might look at who's the second? Who's the wide receiver 2 in Minnesota this year?
Addison.
I can't think of his name.
Addison. Yeah.
You might look at picking up Addison because Stefanski and Darnold are still going to be there over, especially if you don't have a top 3 to 5 pick, over a JMO or a St. Brown would be good.
Yeah.
Because they're not good because it's
offensive coordinators and player and coaching scheme and offensive line are definitely underrated in terms of fantasy and how that impacts a player and their production. Because you're right. If you look at Brian Callahan left the Bengals to go to Tennessee. Well, I loved Chig Okonkwo, but I was worried about Chig's production because you had a offensive coordinator who never really used the tight end in Cincinnati. Now the head coach probably calling plays. Well, what does that mean? Well, Chig had a not so great year because he had a scheme that doesn't fit him. So that's where it played into it. People were talking about Jaden Daniels a ton this offseason. And I said, listen, Dan Quinn likes to run the ball. I don't know what you're talking about with, Jaden Daniels, being the top quarterback. I just didn't see it because Dan Quinn likes to run the ball. So it was like, I'll take a Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler over a Terry McLaurin because when you're talking about passing attempts, you're just not going to get a ton from Jaden Daniels. Now you're going to get rushing attempts from him, which is kind of that cheat code for fantasy. But I think people were undervaluing what Dan Quinn wanted to do in Washington and just thought, oh, well, Jay Daniels is a passer. It's like, yeah, but he's a rushing passer and he wants to run the ball. So that's where it starts to play into it too.
Right. I think there's a lot.
Coaching matters a ton.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think at the end of the day, it's a little bit of everything.
It is, and that's what's hard about this time of year, is especially when you're talking like rookie prospects. People just go, oh, his athleticism or his, his air yards or all these college stats.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. A lot's going to change. When we're talking, what does Joe Burrow and Chase look like? A lot of that's dependent on T. Higgins for me. And a lot of that's depending on the running back. If Cincinnati were to somehow go out and draft Gentry, that changes a lot of Cincinnati's game plan because now you're talking although Chase Brown is good, do they bring in a top guy who's better than Chase Brown, and do they come more of a running team like they were with Mixon? And so if they go out and draft Gentry and don't re-sign T. Higgins, I'm probably going to be further down on Chase and Joe Burrow than I would normally just because I don't think it's the volume's going to be there.
It diminishes the passing volume there. Yeah. If you add a star player one time, it's taken away. If
they keep T. Higgins, keep T. Higgins and don't sign a running back or sign like let's say they sign a Rico Dowdle, I'm all for Chase being the number 1 pick. So
yeah, Triple Crown. That's the first time in a long time you've seen catches, yards, as well as touchdowns.
Yeah.
Just dominant. Burrow, I thought was incredible too. I mean, now he's got to move up into the top echelon if he wasn't already on fantasy day.
Yeah, I think the problem. The Burrow situation's always been interesting because he's always had good receivers. Obviously, health has been an issue because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. It's just a matter of can he stay healthy and can he throw for. He has 34, 36 touchdowns in 21 and 22. Obviously, got hurt last year.
Yeah.
And then this year throws 43. Like, to go from 36 to 43 is a huge jump. I don't care about the 9 interceptions. Like, that's average. I'd like to see it a little lower in the 7-8 range, maybe 6, but you're throwing 43 touchdowns. I don't care. If you're throwing over 40 touchdowns, that's huge because that doesn't happen that often. I mean, 3 guys this year had over 40 touchdowns. That's it. Jackson, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Burrow. Now, you got Josh Allen who threw for, 30. Josh Allen threw for 28, but rushed for like 14. Totally different scenario. So,
yeah.
If my quarterback can throw me
30,
right? Yeah. Allen had 28. Yeah, if my quarterback can go out there and throw 2 touchdowns a game, I'm happy. That's my baseline for quarterbacks is 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. So if they can do that every week, I'm happy. Now, obviously, I would love to get guys who do better than that. Maybe one less interceptions, but I think that's where I'm at. So that stat line, if it's 252 and
his first full year in the league with
2-1, that's 4,250 yards. That's what's that? 34 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. Obviously, I want the interceptions to come down. So interceptions will probably be, even if it's 12. I mean, you give me 4,250 yards. That's a ton of points. That puts you as the 5th best in yards this year. You give me 34 touchdowns. That puts you at 6th best in touchdowns. Like that's just a top 10 quarterback. I'll take that every week. And so for me, it's just finding the guys that can do that. Who can go for 250 and 2 every week. Not everyone can do that. Aaron Rodgers can't. I mean, he'll get you some weeks, but he had 28 touchdowns. I mean, unless you're talking Josh Allen or Lamar or Jaden Daniels who can run him in. I mean, Jared Goff's that kind of guy. I mean, he had 37 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 4,600 yards. I mean, he's right there at the 252 and 1. I mean, he's almost bang on. He's a little bit better in touchdowns, a few more yards. Doesn't run in the end. Puts him as QB6. I'll take that. You can get that late.
So slashing darts and hit Jamison for an occasional bomb and just racks up devastating fantasy numbers. Goff's a surgeon. He's a fantasy surgeon. I mean, he just decimates defenses with those quick little moves, those quick little passes. I mean, that adds up just exponentially over the course of the game. I like Goff a lot in real life too. Even as a bird fan.
Great.
The Eagles Lions collision course. We'll figure that out. Are you a big Bills fan? The Reed and all the other stuff you got.
Big Bills fan. Yeah. So I'm worried about our chances this year, but I'm staying cautiously optimistic. We'll see.
They're having a great run. Great team overall. My buddy that I played college lacrosse. My buddy Mike Szabo is one of the scouts for the Bills now.
Oh, nice.
And so he drafted Edwards and he drafted Keon Coleman. He helped with that.
Oh, nice. The Keon Coleman was super interesting because a buddy of mine who does reporting at Arkansas State knows Keon Coleman's agent. And so they're pretty good friends. So we were down at the draft, and we hang out at the draft and the combine together. So we're down at the draft, and we're headed down to the draft stadium on Thursday. And then he looks at me and goes, "Who do you want?" And I go, "I want a receiver." And he goes, "Which one?" I go, "I think we're wrapped for Buffalo." I said, "I think it's going to be, in that Leggett, Pearsall, Coleman range." He's like, "What do you think of Keon?" And I go, "I think he's good. He's raw, maybe some talent." He goes, "The Bills are going to take Keon." I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I've been talking to the agent, we're friends," and he says that's where he wants. So I was like, "All right, I'm cool with that." And then we're waiting for the monorail to come to take us to the thing, and Keon Coleman's agent calls him, FaceTimes him. And so he's like, so he goes like, so he's talking to him, and he goes, "So what's the word?" And the agent goes, "The Bills want him. The Bills have been calling multiple times to see what's happening. They've asked about the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes has called asking what's going to happen." He goes, "I'm pretty sure the Bills are going to take him. They're just trying to figure out where. If they need to move up, or could they possibly move down? So when the Bills traded with the Chiefs, my buddy goes, well, they're definitely not trading up for Keon. So that means the Bills think they can get Keon late. So obviously the Bills trade back, Chiefs take Worthy, which I thought was a great trade. We pick up a second or a third rounder. And then it was sitting there, I was like, and I told people, I said, Carolina's going to trade up. They have the first pick in the second round. They're going to trade up to get one of these receivers. And so when they traded with the Bills, I was like, oh, this is great. They're not, obviously the Bills know they're not taking Keon because that's what they want. And obviously we saw what happened, right? They trade back, first pick in the second round, they take Keon Coleman. Super great. It seems like he's a super nice guy, like seems to be a Buffalo guy. So I'm super happy they got Keon. I think he's going to be really good for the team. I think him and Shakir can anchor our offense going forward. I think Keon, as he develops, gets a little more speed into him, but the jump ball, contested catch rate is huge. That's great for Josh Allen. Shakir can continue to be that, possession guy.
So
very much, I think, like a Lockett, DK Metcalf type, where you have like the Lockett in Shakir, who can just be the possession guy, get your first downs, and you take a couple deep shots, contested catches with Keon Coleman. He'll bulk up a little bit. He's obviously not built like DK Metcalf. No one is. But I think Keon Coleman in the next 2-3 years can really be that, that alpha threat that you're worried about. He might not always produce big numbers, but I think he can be that guy for us. I think he can be very much what Amari Cooper is in terms of like, he's a name that defenses have to recognize. He may get shut. He's always going to draw top coverage, which might shut him down, but you can throw him up a couple balls every game, and he's contested catch. He's going to get them. So
I think a name to watch. I mean, you mentioned Shakir. I think in real life and in fantasy, like that guy's, every time he touches the ball, it leads to more and more success for the Bills. I mean, we saw that the laps they had when they really dropped off a little bit offensively when he was out, I think for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Kind of late-ish. Shakir, I think he's ready to blow up for like fantasy in real life, like almost like an Amon Saint, like just that short quickness, and he just doesn't drop anything. If they feature him, sort of like the Lions did more, I don't know. I think Shakir could be the man in Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean Shakir's good. He's definitely more of a route. He's a route runner. He's not like the game breaking. He's not a Devontae Adams where he's gonna break the game open. But you're right. Very much like Amon St. Brown, where you can make those. You get him the ball on a quick slant and let him miss a tackle. Yeah, he's good. I think he's really talented. I think he fits what Josh Allen wants to do in terms of what they're trying to do with Josh Allen with this just like quick passing. Because Josh Allen's fatal flaw is he tries to play hero ball too much. So if he has time to sit back there in the pocket for these like long developing routes, he then's like, oh, I can make this. And it's similar to what we saw from early Baker Mayfield, what we saw from Carson Wentz, where they trust themselves too much and they're like, I can make it. And they just like gun it in there and things go bad pretty quickly. And that's why you saw Josh Allen have a ton of interceptions because he was playing, 2 years ago, 18 interceptions last year, 14 the year before, 15. I mean, he's trying to make these big plays. This year he's not, and he's only at 6. Because they just said, hey, let's get the ball out of your hands quick. Let's not give you a ton of time to play hero ball. Let's do this like West Coast, quick passing, slants. We'll take our couple shots, and we'll let you kind of, when we need it, Josh, you're our guy, but let's not make it so we need you. Let's just play quickly. So I think Shakir, I'm looking at Buffalo going, we got James Cook young, Shakir young, Coleman young. Josh Allen is, 7 years in. He's our guy for the next 10 years. Like, he's locked up.
Yeah.
Same thing with Kincaid. Kincaid is a talented athlete, but the system doesn't feature the tight end. He'll always be good. Like for fantasy, he's not great because he doesn't get the ton of targets. I mean, other than when Dawson Knox is out, he's just not heavily used.
That's one thing I'd say that's kind of, and I have so much respect for the Bills. I always appreciate, like, I like watching them a lot. They're kind of one of them. I'm an Eagles fan, but tons of respect for the Bills. I think it might be Bills, hopefully, with the Eagles. We'll see. But I don't know. I like I think like you said, I think Kincaid just isn't quite a great fit, which is surprising to me because he was first round pick tight end. I figured, man, this guy's going to be awesome hitting the ground running. What do you think? Do you think it's kind of just not a great system fit?
I never thought it was. I've been down on Kincaid. He was in that group with Mayer, Laporta, that group where it was like everyone was talking about them as the top guys. Not a great system fit. I've watched a lot of tape on Kincaid because obviously I've been telling people he's a bust since they drafted him. I have a lot of concerns about Kincaid in terms of when I watch his film, the couple words I come up with are lost and lazy. And not lazy like it just becomes like he gets kind of lost out there. Like he misses blocks and he just goes like, I don't know. Yeah, and he's just not there's not the hustle that I see from like that's why Dawson Knox plays more snaps because Dawson Knox hustles, blocks. But I've seen a lot of Kincaid where he's just out there and like he'll either he like if he's supposed to chip on a guy, he'll chip on a guy, and then he like gets out there and he's like, and he's lost and he just goes, or he just like chips on a guy and he's like, okay, I know it's not like I'm the fourth read, so I'm not really gonna try. Just the lost part of me, it seems like he doesn't get the concept. I think he is battling with a little bit of like the hype of Dalton Kincaid, I think, got to Dalton Kincaid. So he's like, I thought I was going to be this big piece of the offense. And right this year, everyone was saying 100 catches, 100 targets, blah, blah, 75. Like, I told people, like, he's just not going to reach there. And I have to look back at my takes because I think I told people about 70 targets was what I was expecting from Kincaid. And he got 75. I mean, he had 2 touchdowns. I mean, they don't use him in the red zone. He's got some red zone targets. He's a gimmicky player. He is in the Irv Smith, Hayden Hurst, early Jonnu Smith, where it's like they're talented, they're just not used properly. And I think if Kincaid went somewhere else, he could be a huge asset and a big time player. He could be Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers. He's just not in a team that fits him. So
how about that?
We can recall like around that period of time of the draft day. That time whereabouts, like his stock rose tenfold, like overnight. Yeah. Kincaid was suddenly a late first rounder, and to bring it back to the combine, that's the case of like a workout warrior. He's fast, he's strong, he kills it, in gym shorts. But then on Sundays, the game day awareness, Dallas Knox is just a smarter player.
Yeah, if you look at that draft class,
if you're fast and big, it's got to show on tape on game days. Most of all,
if you look at that draft class on Fantasy Pros, the ADP for that draft class was Dalton Kincaid 1 at the 8th overall tight end. Michael Mayer was 2nd, 14th overall. Luke Musgraves was 26th overall, 3rd on the list. Then Sam Laporta was 20th overall in tight ends, 4th in the rookie class. Tucker Kraft was 5th. And then you have guys like, I mean, it just gets bad from there. I mean, Lou Schoonmaker, Brenton Strange, like, again, there wasn't, so people are going, oh, Kincaid's going to a team and they're going to use him. I'm like, what about Dawson Knox? And they're, Dawson Knox isn't good. I'm like, yeah, cool, but what about the system? Why is there a reason why Dawson Knox was never good? 2 years ago, I could have sold Dawson Knox in fantasy, in Dynasty for whatever I wanted to because he was having a great season. People were loving him. And then all of a sudden he had a down year. And then people were like, oh, they drafted Kincaid. I'm like, yeah, but why was Knox so good in 2020, 21? 22, he had a decent year. 6, he was tight end 14 in fantasy, 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And then they signed him to a big deal, and all of a sudden you're drafting Kincaid, and you're going, Kincaid's great. Well, yeah, but there's a reason why Knox was good because there was injuries, and they didn't have the players. It's a new system. I mean, when I look at that ADP, I go, Musgrave was a miss. Kincaid was a miss. Mayer was a miss. Sam Laporta that's why I said Sam Laporta was my top guy because he went to Detroit. Tucker Kraft, I was always curious of that 2 Green Bay, tight end rookie class. I mean, Darnell Washington was the 6th. He was always going to be the blocking guy. Brenton Strange was 8th. And I always liked Brenton Strange because I knew that, right, Evan Ingram had great success in Jacksonville. So whenever Evan Ingram's not there, Brenton Strange is going to have a good year. So if Evan Ingram decides to move on, or they move on from Evan Ingram, Brenton Strange is someone who could be next year. If there's no Evan Ingram in Jacksonville, I'm loving that. Like, that's a huge name. So it just goes to show that people get wrapped up. People get wrapped up in athleticism and their 40 times and their RAS scores and all this combine stuff. And it's like, cool, show me what they're going to get. Like, show me the pathway to production. And what does that look like? Because it's just not there. Because, again, we're talking 2023 rookie draft. Kincaid, Mayer, Musgrave, Laporta. Were the top 4 guys. And Laporta's the only guy that's done anything.
Yeah, and he was up below the other rankings. So it goes to show that who shows up, who are the real game day players.
And, I mean, look at
on the combine's not going to show them.
And the year before, it was Trey McBride was 1, Jelani Woods, who's an athletic freak, was 2, Daniel Bellinger was 3, Greg Dulcich was 4, Cade Otton was 5, and then you had Isaiah Likely and Jeremy Ruckert, 6 and 7. Jake Ferguson was 8. But if you look, Cade Otton went to a good situation, right? Once Gronk was gone. Jake Ferguson went to a good situation once Dalton Schultz was gone. So you had just really good players. It just becomes, we always fall in love with these athletic guys, the Sky Moores, the Kyle Pittses, even George Pickens to some extent. It's like, man, they're super talented, but they're just not producing for whatever reason. And why is that? Is it scheme? Is it fit? Is it effort? I've always been down on Jordan Addison, and partially because I don't think his effort is there. If you watch a lot of Jordan Addison film, a lot of his touchdowns come on broken plays. Guy falls down, guy misses a tackle, he's wide open. It's not like he's getting jump balls. It's not like he's like out routing guys. He's just kind of there, and like a guy falls down. It's like, oh, he's wide open. Okay, cool. Or they throw him the ball, and one guy misses a tackle, and he takes off. It's like, well, is Jordan Addison not that good? Or his I think he's not as good as his numbers say. So it's just one of those things where I don't know if the effort is there. I think it just happens to be luck at this point. But it's hard to bet against Jordan Addison when you have 10 touchdowns as a rookie and 9 the next year. But we'll see.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what makes it fun. And I think that's part of what makes it fun is the fact that it is a crapshoot.
It is.
We don't know. Like everybody was drafting. McCaffrey won.
It's one of the things I really like about a lot of the playoff challenges that are happening now. And if you're looking for one, we have one with the Fantasy Advice Network that we're pushing right now. Because you're setting weekly lineups and it's a limited number of players, it allows you to kind of fill those out. Like, where are the good matchups? So a lot of these like one and done. So I play in Baby Bowl, which is another one I really like. You basically submit a lineup every week. You have to do a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, and a flex. But once you use them, you can't use them again. So there's a lot of strategy and find. Yeah, it's like a survivor pool, but it's so you only have a limited players. So what you're trying to do is find guys on. You're trying to find guys on that are going to have a good day on teams that aren't going to win. So maybe you want a Najee Harris who might have a good week but lose, or do you want to use Derrick Henry this week, and then you can't use him again in the future. And so it's this strategy, and I think that's where it comes in. For me, it's a really microcosm of the season of who are the right matchups, who are the right players who have a good opportunity this week or next week, and how do you play that, and how do you look into that? So that's where I really like it. So if you guys are looking for one, you can hit me up on Twitter. We got one at the Fantasy Football Advice Network. And there's also Baby Bowl, which I think you have to get in by tomorrow because it's obviously Thursday. Tomorrow, Friday. Yeah, Fantasy Football or Fantasy Advice Network, Fantasy Sports Advice Network. We have one. It's through Smash Up Sports, which I don't know if you guys know Smash Up Sports. It's free to enter. There's prizes for that one. But you pick your lineup. You have a budget, but then you also have special abilities you can add in for different prices, which is kind of fun. So there's definitely some fun things you can do. Yeah, there's fun things you can do, and so I like these pools because it's a microcosm of the season where it's going, who's got the good matchup, but who maybe doesn't. Who doesn't succeed this way? What's the cornerback matchup? Who's going to have a better week next week? Do I think they win? So, like, this week I'm rolling a ton of Washington guys because I think, like, Jaden Daniels has a good game, but I'm not sure Jaden Daniels wins, right? And even if Jaden Daniels, if the Commanders win this week, I don't think they win next week. So I'm willing to burn Jaden Daniels, and so I'm playing Jaden Daniels and Zach Ertz as that stack. I think they have a good game. I don't think they win against Tampa. But even if they do, I don't think they have a good game next week. So I'm saving, my Derrick Henrys and my Lamars for next week. And obviously then I get the Lions and the Chiefs next week. But it's fun because then you get to the Super Bowl in these one-and-done leagues. And 2 years ago, I came in third because I got to the Super Bowl and I had A.J. Brown left. And no one else did because they had used them. Because if you use all these guys, then it becomes like, where's the depth? Where do you play these guys? And that strategy is really fun. But like I said, it's that microcosm of how do you evaluate weekly matchups over the course of a 4-week span. So what's the matchup look like for Amon-Ra St. Brown next week? Because he's obviously not playing this week. And then projecting him to win. And what's it look like in the conference championship? What does that look like what does it look like if they're playing the Eagles? What does it look like if they're playing, the Commanders? What does it look like if they're playing Tampa Bay? Like, what do those matchups look like? And go, okay, he's got 6 possibilities of guys he could play. He's got 4 favorable matchups. Okay, maybe I want to save him. Or, hey, Derrick Henry, let's take James Cook. James Cook has a good matchup this week against Denver. Probably not a good matchup against Baltimore because Baltimore probably keeps the game close. So they probably don't run a ton. Not a good matchup against Kansas City because they're probably going to be behind and throwing the ball a ton. And then maybe a good matchup in the Super Bowl depending on if it's the Eagles or Lions. Probably not a good matchup. So do you burn James Cook this week knowing that the next 3 weeks are possibly bad matchups? That's the strategy you have to look at in these kind of pools. So I think it helps you prepare for the regular season next year. It's like, okay, who's got next year? Who's got the good matchup? So when you're looking at wide receivers. I always like to look at the draft if the Bears, the Packers, and the Vikings go out and draft top cornerbacks, maybe I don't like Amon-Ra St. Brown as much because that's 6 games he's got to play against those guys, right? Or they sign a big free agent. So I think doing it now for the playoffs for 4 weeks, I think lets you kind of look at this and play it over out each week as you get into the regular season next week. And that strategy and that kind of how you evaluate your process of player matchups really does matter.
A great recent example of that would be a standout example would be like the Bengals. If you're playing it with wideouts or tight ends going against the Bengals, because there's going to be a ton of scored points, and they have a suspect shoddy defense. So it's going to be the scoreboard's going to be lighting up. You want those stats.
Yeah, and even things like the Bills. The Bills have a horrible run defense.
Sure.
But
Yep.
but they're vulnerable against rushers on the outside, not the inside. So when you're looking at them against the Bengals, Chase Brown is really an inside rusher. Or the Ravens, Derrick Henry is really an in between the tackles rusher. Where they get burnt is the quick guys. So if it is Bills Lions in the Super Bowl, which is what I think it could be, I'm really worried about them against Jahmyr Gibbs because he's that outside zone runner that really is the weakness of the Bills. I'm not worried about Dave Montgomery because Dave Montgomery is the straight ahead guy, and they can stop them. They got a great middle of their defense. It's the outside.
Yep.
So depending on who they play, if it's the Eagles, Saquon Barkley's a little bit of both, but I think he's a better, in between the tackle runner. But can they contain him? I'm less worried about Saquon than I am Jahmyr Gibbs because I don't like the outside runners. If they're playing against Bucky Irving, that outside running is going to kill the Bills. But if they're playing against Brian Robinson, I don't care because Brian Robinson's a between the tackle runner. So that's where it's that kind of yes, the Bills have a bad rush defense, but only certain types of rushers really matters. Because some people go, the Bills suck against the run, so I'm going to start Derrick Henry. It's like, well, yeah, it is Derrick Henry, but I'm going to start these kind of plotting, the Alexander Madison types. It's like, yeah, but he's not the right type of rusher to go against the Bills.
Yeah, well, Derrick Henry could be a problem too because he's a monster.
Well, Derrick Henry's just a monster, so he's always a worry because he's just a big, he just pulls you over anyway. So.
Yeah, Derrick. The problem.
He's so awesome.
The problem with Derrick Henry is he's a bit of both.
Yeah, he's a bit of both.
Yeah, and if he gets that first lane is closed, if he hits that first hole and it's closed, he's got the shiftiness to be able to get outside and make problems for you.
Yep.
Yeah. Unlike Saquon.
Of our generation, I think. Saquon and Henry, I think, are the two. Definitely King Henry to me. As far as the best in our generation, I think.
I would agree. I mean, if you take out Adrian Peterson for sure.
Henry, that's select few.
That is a select few. I agree.
King Henry's he's otherworldly. Like there's only one of a kind. You won't see another runner like that physically. Like he'll like you said, Adam. He'll brutalize someone or he'll tiptoe and get around people on the edge. I mean, he does it all. He's not just a bruiser, but he's the biggest running back ever. So it's like a double whammy.
Here in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, he's so big that it's ridiculous. The only guy that I know that is close enough for me is Braylon Allen, who just didn't, went to a horrible situation. So, I mean, Derrick Henry 6'2", 247, Braylon Allen 6'1", 235. It was funny. I'm at the combine, and so I live in Wisconsin. I work at the University of Wisconsin, so I know Braylon Allen a little bit.
Yeah.
I go to the combine, and all the running backs are walking down the hallway, and I'm sitting there talking to some buddies. So I go over to talk to Dylan Lobby, who I know a little bit and who I've interviewed, and I turn around and I'm like, "Who's this offensive lineman walking with these running backs?" Because all the running backs are here, right? I'm 6 foot, so I'm. They're all 5'10", 5'11". They're all here to me, and all of a sudden there's this guy that's just he looks like a linebacker walking with running backs. And I'm like, oh, that's Braylon Allen. He just is so much bigger than all these guys. It was insane. And so I think he has the potential. Now he also is only 20 years old.
Should have gone to the Cowboys.
He should have went to the Cowboys. He should have went anywhere but the Jets. Yeah. Anywhere but the Jets would have been great for Braylon Allen.
Exactly.
But when you're talking size-wise, he's one of the few guys that I think is close. He's not as broad as Derrick Henry. He's not as muscular, but he's also 20, so he's going to bulk up a little bit. But in terms of just pure size, he's the guy that's oh man, he's intimidating when you see him coming.
Amazing.
He's big.
And he went 4th round, dude. I mean, imagine we were talking about a couple teams. Like, if he went to the Cowboys, Braylon Allen was incredible at Wisconsin. And he was a, 17-year-old senior or 17-year-old freshman? Like, what a stud. What an outstanding physical specimen. I was shocked he went in the 4th round. I thought he had first round down. He could be great on the Cowboys right now.
Running back class last year was so strange because you had Jonathan Brooks, you had Braylon Allen, you had all these guys who were like, there was no consensus, 1 or 2. You know, it was just, what do we do? And I think they all, because of that, they all fell. And then when Dallas didn't take a guy, I think that said to people, hey, none of these guys are worth it. And I think we saw this with running backs last year and quarterbacks 2 years ago, the Kenny Pickett draft. I think people were talking about Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis and Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder all being like, oh, we could have 4 quarterbacks go in the first round. And when they kept falling, everyone kind of said, oh, maybe they're all – because I think everyone said, hey, they're all 4 of them are equal, so we'll just take whichever one's left. And then it was like, well, all 4 of them left, we'll wait another round. And everybody's like – and I think the 3 or 4 teams are going, oh, they're all just wait again. And it just became this like everyone wanted to take the last one in that tier, and then no one wanted to take the first 2. So, I mean, Trey Benson, here's the thing. You look at Trey Benson, 6'1", 223, compared to Braylon Allen, 6'1", 235. So they're the same size, but Braylon Allen just seems bigger. I mean, Jonathan Brooks, 6'2", 207. That's 20, 30 pounds he's dropping to those guys. And I know it's an inch, but something about, like, inches are different on different people. And I don't know how else to describe it. Like, if you have a long torso, you don't look as tall. People were talking about Tank Dell and Xavier Worthy being the same size. Now, I'm a big believer in Tank Dell and less of a believer in Xavier Worthy because Xavier Worthy's legs are like this.
He's also
and yes, Tank Dell is the same size, but Tank Dell his legs are like this. I mean, it's just a noticeable difference. So it's like just because they're the same height and weight doesn't mean they're built the same.
Dell could look like a 3rd down running back almost because Dell's close to the ground, but he's got some stock to him.
Yeah.
Whereas Xavier Worthy is just a really soaking wet. He's probably 160 pounds.
Yeah.
You're going to get smoked if you're going up against Brian Branch over the middle against Detroit or something. Worthy's a huge injury risk, I think.
Oh, man. I love Brian Branch so much. He was such a fun guy. He was so fun to hang. Like, I got to not hang out with. We were doing. He was at a private event, and him and his brother were there, and I was just talking to him and his brother. And he was just like, he's just so cerebral and smart. And I told him at the draft, I said, man, wherever you go, people are gonna love you. I said because you just play football the right way. Like, you get it. Him and Christian Gonzalez on the defense were 2 guys at the combines and drafts. And I'm like, oh, these guys are it. Like, these guys get it. These guys understand like their jobs. They understand football from like a defensive level. They're not they're not the Sauce Gardner types of like, look at me, they're just like, I'm gonna go out and do my job. I asked Christian Gonzalez, I said, what are you gonna do on defense and why should like defensive fantasy players draft you? He's like, I'm just going out there, I'm gonna make plays, get interceptions, and maybe score some touchdowns. It's like, okay, cool. Like, he wasn't like, I'm gonna lock down everyone and I'm not gonna leave. It was just like, I'm gonna go do my job and I'm gonna have tight coverage. I'm going to do my job, play the right way, and maybe get the blitz. And Brian Branch was the same way. Like, they're just quiet guys who just do their job, and I really like that about them.
And go out there and do what I do.
Yeah, they're just like, I'm going to go do what I do, and there's certain guys that seem to just love playing that position, that cornerback safety position. Those 2 guys just seem to love doing it. Yeah, they're cerebral players, and that's what I really love about going to the combine. Going to the combine in the draft, like getting to talk to players, definitely shows you a different aspect. One of the reasons why I didn't love Jordan Addison, because I didn't feel like Jordan Addison loved football. I think Jordan Addison knows he's good at football and knows he's talented and knows it's a way of making a living, but I don't know if he just really loves football. He reminds me a lot of Stephon Diggs in that, like, I'm here, I'm going to do my job, like, let's go make money, like, not let's go win. He's not going to be one of those guys like, I'm here to win, I'm here to make money.
If you see the guys if you follow, like, even in our age of, like, let's say the past half decade to decade, you can see it's no mistake if you look at the Bills, great drafting, the Chiefs, obviously Dan Campbell and company, the Lions, the Eagles. I mean, love or hate those teams, even other fans' teams respect them. But like you said, when you can really learn about the players, it's not just their 40 time or their bench press. Like, the players who are going to be winning players, that's who the best players. The winning teams are identifying those guys. The drafting is just different.
And not even just even in the draft, like even in free agency. So I was at the Wisconsin Pro Day. I was at the Pro Day, and Kevin Zeitler happened to be there, right? He wasn't playing at the time, like he hadn't signed with anybody. And him and his brother, he's alumni Wisconsin, came to check out the pro day. And I said hi to him, introduced myself, and I heard him talking to someone he knew really well, and they were like, "What's up?" and like, "What's going on?" He's like, and what Kevin Zeitler said struck me. He goes, "I'm not sure." He goes, "But I'm preparing like the opportunity is going to come tomorrow." He's like, "I'm preparing that I'm going to get the call tomorrow," because he knew that if someone called him, he would be needed tomorrow. It wasn't going to be, "Hey, give me a call and we'll bring you to training." He knew his opportunity was going to be quick. That if someone called him and was like, "Hey, we had an injury, we need you tomorrow to be a starter." So he was preparing like that's the case, and that's the smart way of doing it. When you just go, "Hey, I know that my opportunity could be short notice. I may not have a long runway to get up to speed. I may not have to come in off the street ready." And so I think he played the right way, and obviously he's a veteran and understands that. But I think a lot of these younger guys don't get that. They just go, "Cool, I'll get on there and I'll earn my way, or I'll be given the opportunity because of my draft capital or what I like, or because of who I am or what I did in college." Instead of going, "I need to be ready." Like, you need to be ready for your opportunity because your opportunity may just be tomorrow. And if you're not ready today for tomorrow, you're just not going to be ready.
You can't get ready yesterday.
You can't get ready.
No, you can't get ready yesterday. Yep.
You see the elite teams that are always 12, 13 wins that are going to be playing on the Saturday playoff, like the final, the NFC AFC championships. Those teams aren't bringing in divas, or they're just not really oftentimes missing on these picks. It's just the draft picks are so incredibly important. These best teams, they're drafting the best year in and year out, most times.
Yep.
Well, I think
the Lions have added 20 great players in the last 3 years, I'd say. 3 or 4 great drafts. Look at the proofs in the pudding there in Detroit. I mean, the numbers show up.
Well, it starts up front.
Absolutely. They don't have a penny Oregon tackle instead of a running back. They went offensive line.
Yep.
I've always been a big fan of drafting O linemen in the first round. If you give me unless you're talking about a generational quarterback or a generational receiver, unless you have like a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Peyton Manning sitting out there waiting to be drafted, I'm taking O-line in the first round because there's always at least 1 or 2 first-round great O-linemen. Unless we are, especially if we're drafting in the top 5, top 10. You don't see very many great offensive line teams drafting in the top 5, top 10.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the Chargers. I mean, the Chargers did that. I mean, Harbaugh came in and said, "Hey, I know I lost every receiver we've ever had for the past 5 years, but I know I've got an elite talent in Justin Herbert. I'll go draft Joe Alt over Malik Neighbors," which a lot of people were shocked about. And it's worked out for them. They're in the playoffs. I mean, you can't deny that. I mean, he said, "I'm going to build this the right way." And I think, Joe Alt fit what he wanted to do, and maybe Malik Neighbors didn't. Even if you look at Tennessee, they drafted J.C. Latham over, a Penix or an Odunze who they could have used, or some of the other guys, because they felt that was what best fit their team. Now, I don't think Latham was the right pick. I would have rather had a Jackson Powers or, Laga or something like that. But I think they went with fit. Detroit's interesting because I don't think Dan Campbell is a great football coach. I think Dan Campbell is a great motivator and culture guy. I think he's a leader of men. I think he gets the most out of his players. But I think when it comes to the X's and O's, he doesn't do great. So we saw it cost them the game last year in the playoffs when they went for it instead of kicking the field goal. I'm worried it's going to happen this year because they keep going for it. Even this past week against Minnesota, they didn't need to go for it. They just kept going for it. I feel like he gets it. And I think he's built that culture, which is what Detroit needed. Detroit needed culture. Detroit needed to have someone who could motivate and be a leader of men. I wonder what happens if Detroit loses Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. What happens in Detroit? Because I'm not sure Dan Campbell would have to hire. He'd have to hire the right guys again, and I'm not sure those guys get there. Because Aaron Glenn fits Dan Campbell, same kind of mentality. But Aaron Glenn is a smarter football coach than Dan Campbell is. Ben Johnson is a smarter football mind than Dan Campbell is. But that's what you need to do if you're going to have a Dan Campbell type. And I got a kind of a viral tweet this week about Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel is a mediocre coach at best, right? He has got a slightly better than 500 win record. Yes, he did a lot with Tennessee with a mediocre team. He's a leader of men. I don't know if Mike Vrabel can mentor and develop young talent. He hasn't been able to do it in Tennessee. They had horrible draft picks, and you can blame the GM all you want. Dan Campbell has to be part of that Mike Vrabel has to be part of that process. I get it. Some of the moves, maybe the trading A.J. Brown wasn't Vrabel's choice. If you're a leader of men, you're not just a leader of your football players. You have to be a leader of that front office and GM room too. So you can't tell me you're a leader of men and then your GM does something that you're vehemently against. What I think happened with A.J. Brown is Mike Vrabel said, I'd rather keep A.J. Brown, and the GM said, well, I'd rather trade him, and I think Vrabel went, okay, cool, you're the GM. If Vrabel and I go, you cannot trade A.J. Brown, and you have to make your case, and you have to be the leader of the man that is the GM and go, this is why we need A.J. Brown. I think what happened is they said, we'll trade A.J. Brown and we'll draft Treylon Burks, and I think Mike Vrabel said, okay, cool. We're taking a guy that's an 80 out of 100, and we're getting a guy that's 70 out of 100. Okay, that's a fair swap. Realistically, you're giving a guy that's a 90 out of 100, and you're getting a guy that's 10 out of 100. Again, I just don't know if Vrabel can develop talent. Vrabel may be a leader of men. But unless he surrounds himself with really good coordinators, now he had Arthur Smith, which Arthur Smith is not a good head coach, but a good offensive coordinator. Once Arthur Smith left, he didn't have a great team or didn't have a great record. So unless Vrabel can surround himself with really talented guys who can help develop young talent, I'm worried about Mike Vrabel going somewhere. If Mike Vrabel goes to New England, I'm worried about Drake May.
He might go to the Jets too.
Well, Jets are Jets, and Jets suck. So Jets are
I really think just the easy, awesome razor, like the easiest possibility to envision happening, the closest to the reality, I think, is, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? Trash. Yeah. They got rid of. They quickly reversed gear. They changed course and got rid of that first year coach was a total flop. Mayo.
Yeah, Gerard Mayo. Yeah.
Jared Mayo. I said his name too much, so I just brain freeze. Like I'm done with it. But I mean, that's kind of a shoe-in. Like Vrabel's a classic throwback, very popular in the New England area. I think Vrabel's a Pat's got to be like a done deal for.
I want to go back and look at the timeline because I wonder what happened first. I wonder if it was.
It makes too much sense not to hire Vrabel in New England. I think that's like a shoe-in.
Yeah.
Do you guys think he's going there, or do you think something's?
The goal was given out. They got another one here, so he's given.
I think he's going there for sure.
Make something up.
I think.
Too much sense.
They had apparently they had written into Mayo's contract when he was the assistant or whatever that he would be Belichick's successor.
His heir. Yeah.
I don't think they expected Vrabel to get. I don't think they expected Vrabel to get fired when he did. No. So Vrabel got fired on the 9th of January, and Mayo was hired on the 27th. I think they wanted to hire Vrabel last year, but couldn't because they had already promised the job to Mayo.
That could very well be the case because they were big on both. Yeah, Vrabel was available too. It was weird. Now they're like, a year too late, but let's still make the right decisions. Come on, Vrabel. Yeah. But you're right. He's more just like he's a Campbell style. He's not a real tactician with the X's and O's. They'll need to have two very, very good coordinators, especially as you said with May there. They need an awesome quarterback coach.
I think Vrabel is the type of guy that you don't target. I think he's like the guy you settle on. So if you're going after a Ben Johnson or one of these, Liam Cohen or one of these other hot name offensive coordinators, even an Aaron Glenn, and you can't get them, then you go, okay, we'll take Mayo, or you take Vrabel. I think Vrabel is the guy that gets you to a 9-8 season. Like I don't think Vrabel can get you to maybe get you 10-11 wins if everything goes right. No Mike Vrabel team is ever going to be talked about as a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion. I think if Vrabel was coaching, if you swap Vrabel for Dan Campbell, I don't think you're talking about the Lions as this Super Bowl contender. Same team, it's just a different system. I don't think people believe in Vrabel, so that plays a lot into it. I think he's a good coach. I just don't think he's a great coach. And I'm willing to roll the dice. If I'm an owner, I would rather roll the dice on a Ben Johnson who we don't know, or an Aaron Glenn you don't know, or a Liam Cohen who has really no experience, or some of these other guys, even a Bobby Slowick for Houston who had a down year this year. I'd rather take an unknown. It may miss. You may get a next Adam Gase, or you may get the next Sean McVay. Like, that's where you're at. You just don't know. I'd rather take an unknown and swing for the fences than taking a retread of Vrabel of what I think will be mediocre. That's how I think it's going to be.
All all the McVays of the world. Sorry, but all the McVays of the world. Just to further build on your point, it's that cheesy but true cliche. You know, you got to start somewhere. They all had to get their first chance. So like, you don't need a proven name. Like you said, Vrabel's a lot less talented as far as being a versatile coach and probably developing quarterbacks. I agree with you. I'd want to go. It makes more sense if you really think about it. The Patriots should sign a really good young offensive mind, I think, like a Ben Johnson, younger.
The only way I'm taking Vrabel over those guys is if I'm a team and I'm going, hey, we're going to bring Vrabel in and we're not drafting a quarterback. So either I don't have a young quarterback, so the Raiders or the Saints, who I think the Saints still could do well with Spencer Rattler, and I go, hey, we're going to bring you in. We're going to draft offensive line, and we're going to retread a veteran quarterback. Because that's what Vrabel has done. Tannehill came in after playing for 8 years or whatever with Miami. Came in. And so if you're talking, let's say you're the Raiders. You bring in Vrabel and go, hey, we're going to take our first pick and draft a running back. We're going to draft Gentry in the top 10. And we're going to trade for Kirk Cousins. Or we're going to bring in Russell Wilson for a year or two. You're going to bring one of those stopgap guys and go, hey, we're going to, then in 2 years, next year, in 2026, we'll draft a guy, or 2027, we'll draft a guy. Like, we'll take a veteran now and let you kind of build from the trenches out. Then I can see making Vrabel happen, because then you go, hey, we're giving you 3 years. The problem with Vrabel is you need to give him a couple years. You can't expect success year one. I think that's the issue with a lot of these guys. The Gerard Mayos, the Antonio Pierces, the Frank Reichs in Carolina last year. People were expecting immediate success, and that's not really manageable for most coaches. It just doesn't happen. I've said for the long time, I didn't think the Bears should have drafted Caleb Williams. Not that I dislike Caleb Williams. I thought they should have traded the pick. I thought Washington would have made a great offer, considering Caleb's from the DMV, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia area. My fear was that Ryan Poles didn't have the job security to do that. He knew he had to take Caleb and was going to ride or die with Caleb no matter what, because that's what he needed to do, because he didn't have the job security to do elsewhere. If you look at Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch in San Francisco, they were able to draft Trey Lance, spend a lot to trade Trey Lance, and then not use him and trade him because they had the job security from the owner. They had the ability to make a mistake and go, hey, we made a mistake, we're going to move on, and this is better for our team. And the owner went, cool, I trust you guys. Right? A lot of GMs and coaches don't have that, so they make the scared move because they don't have the job security. If I'm an owner and I'm hiring a GM, I want to hire a GM and a coach together, because I think you have to have that synergy and that compatibility. And I'm going, hey, I'm giving you 3 years. You got 3 years to prove it to me, right? And what's your plan for 3 years? So if I'm hiring, let's say I'm hiring Vrabel and whoever the GM works with them, I'm going, cool, what's your plan for 3 years? Are you drafting a quarterback this year? And they go, no, we're going to sign, we want to sign Russell Wilson. I go, cool, so you want a quarterback next year? They go, yeah, we'd rather get a quarterback in 26. You let Wilson play for a year. Okay, cool. I'm fine with that. Or, hey, we're going to draft a guy and let him sit. I'm fine. Like, you have to give me a 3-year plan to rebuild that franchise. I'm not expecting you to do it year one.
Well, I think a lot of fan bases look at Detroit and look at how quickly San Francisco, LA, Buffalo, how quick their turnarounds were.
Yeah.
And they got young, smart guys, and they expect their franchise to be able to go out and get a young, smart guy who's going to be there for 20 years and get them. And so when you don't have that instant success, you'll have your GM, the GM head coach, get scared.
Yeah.
And so they make instead of making a smart move, they make a bold move, a brash move.
Yep. I mean, even if you look at Detroit, they hired Dan Campbell, traded Matthew Stafford, and still go 3-11 or 3-13.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The next year they come out, they trade DeAndre Swift, or he's hurt. They go 9-8.
Yep.
And so most coaches and GMs get fired after that. You traded away our Hall of Fame franchise quarterback in Stafford. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has done great, but not, isn't clicking. You're not clicking with, like, Goff is doing great, okay, not great. You haven't drafted a guy. We drafted Penei Sewell, who's doing well. You go a 3-11, 3-13 season, a 9-8 season. Most coaches and GMs get fired. What happened in Detroit is the ownership said, no, we believe in the vision. We believe in what you guys are doing. So we're going to give you another year. And look what happened. They come out and 12-5, losing the conference championship. Now they're 15-2. They believed in them and gave them the ability to go in and draft from the inside out and make the moves, and knowing that they had a couple years. That's the difference in Detroit.
The difference in Detroit, the other difference in Detroit compared to like Chicago or New England or LA, Las Vegas, is that the fan base was behind Campbell and Golf. The fan base believed in Campbell and Golf. And so when you can get the fan base to buy into what you're doing, you have a mulligan year or two. When you beat your biggest rival on prime time to prevent them from going to the playoffs, you buy a lot of capital with your fan base. You can go in, you can have a miserable year in year one, but you're fun, you're exciting, you're a breath of fresh air, which is what Dan Campbell was in an oxygen-starved environment. Dan Campbell was an oxygen mask who breathed life into the excitement into the franchise, even though they were losing, even though they went 0-10-1 before they got off the schneid. He was still fun. He had everybody buying in. And when you have everybody buying in, you can get the fan base to buy in and give you that extra year. And then you reward that fan base with a 12-5 season and a trip to the conference championship. You can make some crazy decisions on and off the football field. Drafting Jamar Gibbs, going for it on fourth down, on every fourth down. Yeah. And the fan base goes, yeah, that's just how we play football now. It's fun. Is it risky? Yeah, it's risky, but we'd rather lose with risk than not win with conservativeness.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, bad teams are bad teams because of bad owners, and more often it's impatient owners.
Right. Look no further right here in New York.
Mark Davis.
Lou and I are backyard, and you got two terrible owners. Jets and Giants are train wrecks, and it's musical chairs as far as coaching. No one even knows who's coming and going. It's an absolute ship of fools. Yeah, it starts at the top. Definitely.
I mean, look at the Bills. Bills were so bad until the Paculas bought them, and then they turned around. Look at the Commanders. So bad with Dan Snyder. All of a sudden, the Commanders sell the team, and all of a sudden they're a playoff team the year after they sell. Okay. But look at the Raiders. It's always been a Davis. Al Davis.
Always a show. Always. Clown show. Yeah.
It's the Bears. Always been Haskey. Look at Carolina. Even when Tepper bought them, it's just a bad owner who just is impatient. Look at the Colts. Jim Irsay is one of the worst owners who doesn't get enough.
That bad culture, man. Yeah, it smells. It gets under your skin and then your fingernails, and they dread going to work, and they expect to lose. Losing
he's
culture.
So impatient about
free
everything.
Agents don't want to go there. It just slides downhill. But like the Lions are like they're the best. Your two, dude, Lions and Bills are like the two best, most recent examples of like just going on a roll right now. They're two of the most dangerous teams, and players want to play for them, and people want to tune into them.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Eagles. Jeffrey Lurie, great owner who just has Howie Roseman, who does great. Like when you have owners that are patient and bring the right talent in the front office, you get good franchises. When you have a team that just is so impatient like the Colts, or just so dysfunctional like the Jets or the Browns, it just becomes this like it just is always going to be a mess because there's no. The problem with the Colts is Jim Irsay has been chasing the Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck since he thought Andrew Luck was going to be Peyton Manning. Luck retires early, and he's been chasing. That's why they retread Carson Wentz and Phillip Rivers and Joe Flacco, and it's like, and now Richardson's there, and I really fear for Richardson because if they don't produce next year, I think when you have to put out a statement at the end of the year saying we're retaining our coach Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard, that shows me that you probably should have fired him because you thought people.
If I'm safe, my name's not in that. Don't worry, he's cool. He's okay with me.
You don't see the Eagles putting out there like we're keeping. The Bills aren't putting out there. We're keeping. Sean. We don't see it. McDermott doesn't. Bills aren't putting like we're keeping Sean McDermott. It doesn't happen. The 49ers had a down year. They're not putting out a statement going, we're keeping Kyle Shanahan. Everybody knows they're keeping Kyle Shanahan because you don't let them go. It's these teams that are impatient owners going, well, we need to do something different, but we're not going to do it this year because I honestly think the Colts looked at it and go, we drafted heavily in Anthony Richardson, and a new coach probably is not going to like him, so we might as well keep Shane Steichen. Because I think they knew, like, do we want to be the 6th or 7th team in the coach hunt when there's not that many great coaches out there? Are people going to want to come in? No, and I think Irsay goes, well, I'll just stick with it for now. I would say next year Shane Steichen's gone, and they're going to go from there. So,
but that winning creates such a good environment, like the Bills, like the Lions, where it's like good things are happening. But it's on that other side of that other side of the knife, like that other side of the wall. Like if like you said, if you're in a toxic losing locker room. The Jets, like the owner, he's not giving these coaches, like you said, no one gets 3 years. Yeah. So like they're in a perpetual cycle of losing and failure, and the fans are miserable. I don't really see a quick way to turn it around for either New York team. They're just in a bad spot.
Yeah, and that's the problem. So you have like a Giants team that had a good asset in Saquon Barkley, couldn't retain him, made the bad decision to sign Daniel Jones to a big contract instead of drafting a guy. They made the right decision in Malik Neighbors. The problem is now you need to make 2 or 3 good decisions for it to work out. Because if they go out and get a bad quarterback, it doesn't matter how good Malik Neighbors is, right? Like he could be CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, but if you have crap thrown to you, it doesn't matter. And if you don't have a good offensive line that can get him the time, it doesn't matter. I think the Giants need. I mean, they're going to keep they're keeping Daboll, so it's. Can Daboll work his magic like he did with Josh Allen? I don't think it was all Josh. I don't think he was I think he was part of the reason why Josh Allen got better. I don't think he was the only reason. I think people are billing him as the only reason. The Jets are the Jets. They're bad across the board.
No kidding.
They're just a bad franchise.
They don't
poorly
draft.
Run.
They're poorly run. They don't draft well.
Hijacked by Aaron Rodgers. Just ridiculous.
They don't do free agency well. They don't hire coaches well. I mean, every quarterback that's come out of there has just been awful.
Do they do anything right?
No, I mean they just can't. They can't get out of their own way. That's the problem. Is they just go, well, we're gonna do this. And this is gonna be great. And the problem is they're so full of themselves that they're like, oh, Aaron Rodgers is gonna lead us to the promised land. It's like, probably not.
Yeah, right.
Like, there's a reason why the Packers let a 2-time MVP, back-to-back MVP walk out the door. I mean, you just don't do that for nothing. Right? And they just go, we'll be better with them. And they just have never proven it. And their ownership is, Woody Johnson is just so delusional. It's just going to be bad.
They have really talented young, but like they had Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. Those are 2 of the best young offensive players on the planet. And then defensively, they have Sauce Gardner. They have some defenders. Like they had talent. The Rodgers thing just blew up. It literally set them back again, I guess, a couple of years because and then Sam Darnold's lighting it up now. Like they just. They've had bad luck. They still have some good talent, but I don't even know if it's worth it if Rodgers stays. He looks so bad. It's just a train wreck.
I can't imagine Rodgers comes back for another year.
He took over everything. He made trades for them. He brought in Randall Cobb and these scrubs, and he's like calling the shots. And now he's like, I think I'm leaving. They don't even know.
He should. I mean, he's so bad that he should leave. I mean, he's just not. It's just not there. I think Rodgers should. Rodgers should do the Flacco thing. Don't sign anywhere. Retire. But stay in shape, and then mid-season someone calls you and you go back, right? Like that's what you do. You don't.
Yeah.
Like you just don't. You don't need to be the starter. Like you need to go back and whether it's just rest up and darkness or whatever you need to do to just be away from the game. Because I do think I think part of Aaron Rodgers is the ego and like he wants to prove that he's good. That's why he didn't retire after last year. He didn't want to go out in the injury. I think he wanted to retire when Brady retired. But I don't think he wanted to share the Hall of Fame with Brady because if they both retired the same year, they'd be in the same Hall of Fame class. I think Rodgers won another year. So he came back another year with the Jets. Obviously got hurt 4 plays in. Realized I can't let that be my lasting legacy. I need to go out and prove it. And now played subpar and now is going, well, I'm probably not as good as I once was. So I probably should just fade away. But is that really the way? Is that how I want to go out? If Rodgers would have retired his last year with the Packers, he would have retired as back-to-back MVP and would be in the conversation of top 10, maybe top 5 quarterbacks all time.
Oh yeah, no question.
He ruined his legacy by
4-time MVP.
He ruined his time, but he ruined it by sticking around. If he would have stayed with the Packers, he probably wins another MVP.
He never should have came back this year. Never.
No, he should have just been done. But again, I think his ego got to him of I need to prove something to somebody.
It's just pride. His pride wouldn't
There's so many guys from so many teams that I still root for, even as just an Eagle fan. But for some reason, man, he was one of the very few players, big name players, that I was always like, I never quite bought into it with Rodgers. I always respected him, but I was never head over heels about him. I saw the interceptions. I saw him, shaking his head, kind of like dissing teammates on TV. People see that. Yeah, he's always had a little bit of diva, and now he's got plenty of diva, and now he doesn't have the skills to back it up.
Yep.
He's kind of like come back to really haunt him. I don't know. I get the top 10 talk, but I never saw him like a Josh Allen. I would take 7 days a week over him without even blinking.
Oh yeah,
in their primes. I just was never a huge Aaron Rodgers guy. Even in his prime, I was never a huge Rodgers guy personally.
Aaron Rodgers, there are a few guys that were better.
Yeah, I would take prime Aaron. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, his ability, like when you're talking 2011, 2012, 2015, those eras, like when he's talking, 2011 he had 45 touchdowns. 2012 he had 39. He only played 9 games in 2013. He had 17. 2014 38. 2015 he played 16 games, had 31. 4 to the year after. Like that's prime Rodgers. That was hard to beat because he just 9. As terms of as a pure pass, here's what I'll say: Rodgers is the best passer I think we've seen in our generation. Brady's probably better. He's right up there with Brady.
Placing it in a window, putting it with touch, ball placement.
But in terms of the quarterback and leader of a team, I don't think he's great. And that's where I think it goes back to kind of the conversation we had about coaching is like you can be the best pure passer. So we have this with the Dan Marino, Jim Kelly debate. They always say, who was better? And I go, better at what? And they go, what do you mean? I go, Jim Kelly is the better quarterback in terms of leading the team and controlling offense. Dan Marino is the better passer, hands down. The stuff Dan Marino could do with his throws and his accuracy and his velocity and fitting in windows is way better than Jim Kelly. I don't think Dan Marino could ever lead a team the way Jim Kelly did. So when you're talking passer versus quarterback, and that's where I get to with coaches to say when it's like culture builders, sure, Dan Campbell's great. X's and O's coach, probably a different thing. So when you're talking Aaron Rodgers as a passer is amazing. As a quarterback, I wonder if he really was I'm going to lead the team. I'm going to put my check. I'm going to check my ego aside. I'm going to do what's best for me. Yeah, and I think that's where Carson Wentz has failed. Josh Allen, early in Josh Allen's career, that's where he failed because he took too much on himself and said, I'm going to do it instead of we're going to do it. Instead of, hey, this is Josh Allen went out there. My son's 11, and he'll watch Bills game. And every time the ball's time, I go, smart, be smart, Josh, be smart. And I go, smart plays, not big plays. Because for the longest time with Josh Allen, it was big play, big play, big play. Because he wanted to do it. Josh Allen wanted to win the game. Instead of the Bills winning the game, Josh Allen. Now I think Josh Allen's got a point where it's like, hey, the Bills, I need to get the Bills to win a game. And I think that's where it's at now. So
he's matured a big time. He's matured a great amount. I mean, honestly, it's a shame not to sound corny, but literally looking at like the Bills, even this year, I would say the Bills, Ravens, and the Chiefs, you can't get rid of them. So it's like, I would say 3 teams are absolutely deserving of getting to the Super Bowl. Josh Allen's overdue. Lamar Jackson's overdue. Only one can get there. The AFC is just a hacksaw right now. A buzz, murderer's row to me. And if you don't have the Bengals, next year you'll have the Bengals.
I think for Josh Allen, the problem was that Josh Allen felt like he was the only one there in Buffalo early in his career.
Sure.
He didn't have the guys to lean on. He didn't have the defense to lean on. He couldn't just punt and play defense.
He took on the franchise quarterback mantle too personal. I think that was the problem with Josh Allen early on. Is he took on, I'm the franchise guy. That means that I need to be the guy. It's like, no,
you have to win.
Right.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. It's you're not yes, you are the leader of the team, but sometimes the best leaders are in the background, right? It's handing off to James Cook.
Yeah.
It's throwing the short pass to Shakir, let Shakir do his magic, and people go, oh my gosh, did you see what Khalil Shakir did? Or did you see the amazing catch that Stephon Diggs made? Or did you see the amazing catch that Keon Coleman made versus, oh my gosh, did you see the throw Josh Allen made? And I think that's where Josh Allen faltered. And I think a lot of guys do that. I think that's one of the benefits of Mahomes. Mahomes learned early on, I think even in college, that I am a steward of our team, not the leader of our team. I am the guy who's there to make everyone else better and let them. Mahomes has always been the guy, let me put you in a position where you can excel. Travis Kelce, let me throw you the ball into a position where you can then go make a play, make a guy miss. Tyreek Hill, I'm going to put the ball where you can use your speed. It wasn't. Now, Patrick Mahomes can do all these crazy throws and stuff, but he is not the, oh my gosh, look what I did guy. He's the, look what our team did. Like, look what this guy did. Oh, when he talks about, like, MVPs, and he goes, oh, anytime you talk to Mahomes and you hear him after the games, it's, well, did you hear our defense? Did you see Pacheco? And he talks about everyone else because he is everyone else first. And that's what a true leader is. It's everyone else first, not yourself. I think that's where a lot of these young quarterbacks come in. That's where I think Baker fell apart early on. That's where Johnny Manziel fell apart. It was me, 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 me. And I think Baker has matured, and it had to because he's been bounced around and realized, oh, it's not all about me. And he went and learned from Stafford, and he learned behind Andy Dalton, and he played with all these other guys on teams and goes, oh, I get it.
Well,
you have guys like that who
he's turned around so big time. I mean, he's really become one of the top tier quarterbacks, man. Everyone had him written off in Cleveland. That was just another example. He was immature, and like you said before, terrible system fit. Cleveland was just where a quarterback would go to die, almost.
And so he went to Carolina. Wasn't great in Carolina. Didn't have the structure. And then went to LA for the end of the season, right? And got some good coaching even for limited time. And then went to Tampa, and Tampa really coached him up and said, hey, this is what we need from you. And I think that Tampa fit for Baker was the right fit because he matured enough to the point where it was, okay, I know I'm not the guy anymore. I know I'm here to help us win. It's not about making Baker Mayfield famous. It's about making the Bucs win. And then he had a good coach and Dave Canales and Todd Bowles to go, okay, cool, this is what we need from you now. And this is what we're going to, and we're going to put you, and they're the right coaches to go, okay, here's what we can do to accentuate your strengths and hide some of your weaknesses, because the athletic ability has always been there for Baker. It's just been bad coaching and bad maturity. Look at guys like Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett won 2 national championships. Should have been a top pick. Fell because of the personal concerns and the issues. And then has never been able to get right in the NFL and is basically out of the league 2 years in. It's just one of those things. If you look at the wide receiver position, yes, I'm old enough to remember the divas of, Randy Moss and Terrell Owens and those, and, the Chad Ochocinco's. If you look at the guys that are really good now, the Amon-Ra St. Browns, even the CD Lambs, they're quiet. You don't hear them talk a lot. They're not out there bragging. AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. Jefferson's really the only guy who is big
talker.
A big talker, but he's not like overly. He's not too much of a diva.
Yeah.
He plays.
He's not doing push-ups in his driving.
It's a character that he. It's a character he plays on the field.
Flashy, it's excited. It's
excited. And I think that's where guys like Debo and Ayuk have faltered because they become me guys instead of team guys. And I think they struggled with that. I mean, if you look at someone, even DK Metcalf has fallen in that a little bit of being a me guy. But I think he's learning, his whole stand-on business thing. Like, he's learning, hey, I need to be a team player. And I think we're seeing that I think we've seen that diva come out of the wide receiver position. I think it's crept into the quarterback position. As the league becomes more of a passing league and quarterbacks are getting more money and deals and endorsements, they become more me guys. And I need to build a brand. And so you don't need to build a brand. Your brand will be built if you win. I think everyone, especially these younger age, like, oh, I need to build my brand. It's like, no, your brand will be built if you win. You don't need to be the top guy. You don't need to be Baker Mayfield early in his career doing all these commercials or Money Manziel and going out there and making you just need to go out there and win. Just go out there and win. And if you win, that all those things will come. And I think people are learning that now. So I'm hoping this generation of younger quarterbacks. I think we saw it with Stroud and Bryce Young. I think Will Levis was borderline on those levels of cocky versus confident. But I think we've seen a lot of these young guys come in and go, hey, I'm good. I'm going to let my game speak for myself and let everything fall in after that. Caleb and Will Levis were the two for me the past few years that have been on that borderline of they can go off the edge into too cocky. But they know they have athletic abilities. I think they're just, if they don't fit in the right system. So I'm hoping this next group of class, that Shedeur Sanders is the big one for me, and Travis Hunter. Can these guys, and I know Hunter's not a quarterback, but can these guys come in and be humble team players and not be detriments to their team? I'm worried about Shedeur coming into the league and not being coached by his dad. I mean, he might be, whatever. We'll see what Raiders want to do. If Shedeur goes to, let's say the Giants draft Shedeur Sanders, I don't think Brian Daboll puts up with a lot of that crap. And I think there's some instant disconnect
he's old
there.
school Alabama style.
There's just not going to go well. If Shador, now, I've said for the longest time, I thought the Giants would fire Daboll and hire Dion and Shador. I think now that could be the Jets and it could be the Raiders, who hires Dion and draft Shador.
Yeah, I can see that. He's got some
I'm not sure.
It's been rumbling for Vegas.
It works for a while until it doesn't. Now you can say Colorado had such a turnaround; they still weren't like a powerhouse in college football.
In the bowl game.
I mean, they played well. They're not they're not undefeated. They're not they're not in the college football playoff.
He's just like, but I'm not going out of my way, especially top 5. That's the problem. It's it's best player available, right? If they have this crying need and the fans are like, give us a damn quarterback over and over from thousands of angry fans. You don't want to get pressured into taking a QB. I don't see an Andrew Luck. We rarely do, but like, there's no sure thing at quarterback coming out to me.
There's
no. It's going to be risky as heck. Whatever they decide is going to be risky. I don't see a sure thing.
Here's what I'll say: if I'm watching draft coverage and a team drafts a quarterback and their fans cheer, probably doesn't end well. If you look at the teams that have drafted quarterback, right? Bills draft Josh Allen. A lot of people boo.
Yeah,
they boo because that's not the guy. It wasn't a big name.
Smaller school.
Look at right. Cardinals draft Kyler Murray. Everyone cheers. Look at your Eagles. When they drafted Donovan McNabb, they got booed out the building.
It hurts. Well, we have once. Why are we taking Hurts? And a year later, boom. All right.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. So when you get when you make when you're trying to make splashy plays, you generally make bad plays. Carolina made the splashy play for Bryce Young, and I know Bryce Young has played really well this year and turned it around. It might work out for them, but they went out and made the splashy play instead of the smart play. Carolina should have just stayed put and drafted whoever. They could have drafted Stroud. Bryce Young might have been there. Who knows? Like, they should have just stayed put. I don't think they needed to go out there and make this big play. They especially all they gave up for Young, who I think is fine. Wow. Again, Bryce Young is going to be a fine quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 10 quarterback. He's fine. And fine is okay. Fine could be good. Like, fine is fine in the NFL. You can be Trevor Lawrence is fine, and you can be fine in the NFL and be competitive if you surround him with the right coaching and the right team. The problem is when you rely on a quarterback who is fine to win your league and win your division. That's why the Jags are bad, because they expect Trevor Lawrence to win the division. He couldn't do it. Got hurt this year, and then now they got a new coach. So the Jags are probably going to be bad.
We were talking about him a couple of weeks ago here. Do you feel he's rightfully the guy? Is he a franchise guy still, Trevor Lawrence, or is he a little bloom off the rose? Is he overrated?
I have always said that Trevor Lawrence is a 12 to 17 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
And so it matters of expectations. He was drafted as the next Andrew Luck, generational talent. He was never going to be that. He was always just going to be a middling quarterback. He's Kirk Cousins. He's Derek Carr. He's Andy Dalton, right? Like, that's who he is. The question is, for me, as the Jags, now, obviously, they paid him. So the question for me going into this previous offseason before they paid him was, are we okay with middle of the road? Or do we want to roll the dice and possibly get nothing? Because that's the problem with quarterbacks is if they don't sign Trevor Lawrence and they let him go and they go out and get, I mean, this past quarterback class has been really good, but would you rather have Trevor Lawrence or Bo Nix? At this point, probably Bo Nix.
But I think that's all smoke and mirrors, though.
Yes,
because I think if you take, I think if you reverse the situation, if you put Bo Nix on the Jags, he stinks, and everybody goes, "Why the hell is?" And
I agree. I think whoever went to the Jags was not set up for success. So is he a franchise guy? I think you're okay with Trevor Lawrence. We've seen quarterbacks take teams to Super Bowls, right? Like Tannehill and Vrabel took the Titans to the AFC Championship game. I mean, Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. Rich Gannon won a Super Bowl. I mean,
Gannon didn't win a Super Bowl. Ryan Johnson won that Super Bowl.
Yeah, same thing. So I mean, I think you could be fine. The question is
how long can you be fine?
Even when you're drafting a quarterback, you have to go, is this quarterback better than every quarterback in the next 3 years? Because that's really the window.
Yeah.
But it's a lot harder to win it all with compared to having a franchise quarterback. It's doable. It's just not as likely. When's Bryce Young going to be in NFC Championship game.
Never.
I don't know. It's like the second that elite tier. That's where the Super Bowl championship.
Next level guy.
So I think Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was worthy of a contract.
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence was probably worthy of a contract and worthy for the Jags to stick with him. The problem is, unless something breaks the right way, and they can, like, Brian Thomas is a great piece. Can Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby be a good enough running back duo? Do they need to get some more offensive line help? Can their defense be better? Yes, you can build around Trevor Lawrence. You just invested a ton of money into him. A ton of money.
And that's the problem.
Yeah. But that's just the nature of QB contracts. They keep going up and up and up. And so I think if I was the Jaguars front office, I think I would have been in the boat of let's probably sign him. I don't think I would have signed him that big of a deal. I would have looked at trades and see what would have been available. If I could have gotten a Drake May or a Bo Nix, I think I would have been okay. I would prefer Drake May over Bo Nix. I mean, yes, we could have got J.J. McCarthy or Daniels. I think you definitely did that, but I don't think that was possible. So I think if you're the Jaguars, I think you go, hey, let's just try to build around Trevor Lawrence and structure the contract in a way that you can kind of build with that. Yeah. Obviously, getting Brian Thomas was a huge boon, and if he can continue to be good, I think you're all right. So I'm not like upset. If I was a Jags fan, I wouldn't be upset that they signed Trevor Lawrence. I'm more worrisome that they just don't have the structure in place in the front office, especially now with having a new coach, that Trevor Lawrence can succeed. And so you're just going to be middle of the road for the next 7 years with Trevor Lawrence, and then what?
It's amazing the fall they had such high hopes. I mean, that's around when Tampa got good again. Baker was yet to arrive, I think, though, but they were in and out of the playoffs. But Jacksonville was desperate for a winner. They land Doug Peterson off the Super Bowl win, and everyone was like, and then they get Lawrence right away. I mean, I thought it was a match made in heaven. Just totally collapsed on him. What do you think happened? Was Peterson like negligent or overrated? I mean, it really went south quick.
I think Peterson is overrated. Peterson has been loyal to Press Taylor. He's been loyal to Press Taylor, and Press is a great guy, and he's one of my best friends. Is real good friends with them, so I know a little bit more about Press.
Oh, cool.
Great guy. I don't think Press Taylor is necessarily like the greatest, again, developer of players. I think Press Taylor is a smart coach and a great guy and a great leader and motivator. I don't think he's necessarily the best developer of players. I think Doug Peterson was overrated. I think a lot of it was Frank Reich and what he did and some of the other players, pieces there. So I think Doug Peterson, obviously, you won a Super Bowl, so you get that clout, and it is him. He's the coach. I think Trevor Lawrence was overhyped. I don't think he was ever a generational talent. I said from the get-go that he is, Andy Dalton. He is maybe Matt Ryan at best. Like, maybe he can have an MVP season if everything breaks right and he has a real good year. Like, maybe. If you look at Matt Ryan was always just good. And they're like, oh, Matt Ryan's good. But you're never like, oh, Matt Ryan's a top 10 quarterback, right? He wins an MVP one year, goes to a Super Bowl, and you go, no one was picking Matt Ryan in the top 10 to go, hey, who's the guy who wants to run your franchise right now? And it was never Matt Ryan. It was always, sure, I guess I'll take Matt Ryan, at that point. So I think that's what happened with Trevor is you get an overhyped quarterback, kind of an overhyped coach, and a coaching staff that can't develop a young quarterback, and on a team that didn't have great weapons. And you bring in, they paid a ton of money for Christian Kirk, which I know last year was really good. This past year was not so great. He got hurt,
This year,
Ridley was there, and they brought him in, and they traded for him, and he was okay. Evan Ingram obviously has done really well, and they won on that gamble. Travis Etienne comes in, gets hurt his first year, so I think that slowed that. They draft Tank Bigsby, and then he got hurt, so they've dealt with a lot of injuries. I just don't know if you can't develop young players, whether that's on offense or defense, you're automatically setting yourself up to be mediocre or bad, because you're just never going to be able to get ahead. Because if you can't bring in a guy in the draft and have him go from being either a high draft capital or mid draft capital guy and being to a starter, you're missing out. Your first round picks, no matter where they are, first overall to 32nd, they need to be every down players. Your second round picks need to be 80% players. Your third round picks need to be playing half the snaps. Your fourth and fifth round guys, they should be able to they should be depth pieces. But if you can turn those fourth and fifth round guys into 50% players, that's where you win. That's where the Lions have won, right? You draft an Amari St. Brown, you draft a Malcolm Rodriguez, you draft these lower guys and you can develop them. I think there's just developing players is an underrated talent in the league right now. And we're just seeing coaches who win despite of it, like a Mike Vrabel, and then they go somewhere where they have to develop and they can't. And so I think with Doug Peterson, the Jags, I really do think it was overhyped QB, overhyped coach, not a good fit. Because it's all based on expectations. If you look at Caleb Williams this year, his expectations were generational talent. Based on that, he had a bust year. If you look at Jaden Daniels, it was questionable talent. And you go, Jaden Daniels had a great year. They had very similar stats. They had very, very similar stats. But it was all based on expectations. And that's always been the issue is what were the expectations for these guys versus what they did? And when you have all these unrealized expectations and unmet expectations, that's where you get the fans that are frustrated. You get front offices and owners that are frustrated. And that's when you just get in the cycle of the Jim Irsay of, well, I was expecting this to be the thing. Okay, I was expecting this to fix it. And it just becomes unrealistic expectations you can never live up to. So I think Trevor Lawrence is in that 12 to 15, 17 range of quarterbacks in the NFL. I think he's worthy of being a starter in the league for the next 7 to 10 years. I just don't ever think Trevor Lawrence will be the guy. I think if you put Trevor Lawrence on any of these teams that are in the playoffs, I think you go, they're probably out in the first round. Right? If Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback of the Eagles, you're not going, the Eagles definitely win. You go, the Eagles might not win. Right? You just, your really confidence level goes down.
Really, he was such a no-brainer number one. That's what makes it just further proof. There's no sure thing. I mean, Caleb Williams, off the charts athletically. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't as high as on him. I'm not as big into college, even for the draft process as you are. But I kind of like Daniels more. But you're right. The situation in the coaching is so incredibly important. It's so there's so much more than just, like if you're running a Madden franchise, you draft a guy, you expect him to plug right away. There's so much more behind the scenes that you're able to tap into with your job. That's awesome. Who was your favorite rookie coming out last year?
Oh, that's a hard one. Last year.
That's my last question. I've been sputtering too much with too many questions. That's my last one of the night for you.
Last year, I have always said that I thought Michael Penix was the best quarterback in that draft class.
Wow.
I thought what Michael Penix did in college in the terms of, not just winning, but like when we talk about Caleb's like that, facing adversity, playing through adversity, playing a different style. I thought he was the best quarterback in the draft class. So I was super excited for him to come out. I did not love the landing spot, obviously, in Atlanta. What we've seen the past few weeks is that he's really good, and I think that's going to be a huge boon for them going forward. He was the guy on offense I was really interested in. Obviously, Keon Coleman, just because I went to the Bills. I was really interested in Cooper DeJean coming out. I thought he should have been higher than what he did. I thought he was a first-round talent. Obviously, I think you redraft, he's definitely a first-round talent at this point. I mean, he fell to the second round. The Eagles always seem to get guys, and every year we are at the draft and we go, we're gonna let the Eagles. This guy's gonna draft Nolan Smith. Oh, Nolan Smith should have been a top 10 pick, and he falls like the end of the first round for the Eagles. It's like, how do we let the Eagles just keep getting these guys? It's just like it's just one of those things. Yeah, they keep falling to him. It's like, man, these guys should have been higher. So those are the two this past year that I was really interested in. This year's going to be different. I haven't done a ton of scouting yet. I'm not doing the combine this year. I'm actually going to Buffalo for my friend's party. He's having a big 40th birthday party. But I'm really interested in Trey Harris from Ole Miss, the wide receiver. I think he's going to be interesting. And then Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan. I'm curious to see where he goes because I do think there's a couple interesting tight end landing spots. Not a ton this year, and there's not a ton like the free agency classes, Mike Gesicki and Zach Ertz. So we'll see where he lands. I mean, everyone was big on Ben Sinnott going to the Commanders, and I knew he wasn't going to be good because Zach Ertz. So if Zach Ertz leaves, does Ben Sinnott step up, or does Washington go out and get Colston Loveland? We'll see. So
if Colston Loveland can stay healthy, he's going to be a problem.
Hey,
got to stay healthy, yeah.
He's awesome. He's fun to watch. He's got a great tight end too. Ferguson, I think. Yeah. Nothing like a good rookie tight end. Look at Brock Bowers, man. What 100 catches for Vegas.
Yeah, the problem is I think what's going to happen for fantasy this year is people are going to be chasing that, and I don't think there is a landing spot. Hey, there's no Brock Bowers in this class. But yeah, I also don't think there's a landing spot like Sam Laporte in Detroit that's like, okay, this is going to be a boom for a tight end. I think, right, if Washington doesn't draft someone and decides to not have Ben Sinnott be the guy, I can see that being a landing spot. But other than that, I mean, I don't think Cincinnati drafts a guy because I think they like Eric All. There's not a ton of free agent spots. So where else is a good landing spot? Does Jonnu Smith move on from Miami? Maybe that's a good spot, especially if Tyreek's gone. We'll see. I just don't know if there's a ton of other spots where I'm like, oh, I love a tight end there. Maybe maybe Kansas City or San Francisco goes out and draft a guy, in the second or third round, and they're, Kittle and Kelsey kind of take a lower role. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. There's just not a great landing spots for tight ends this year, which it's tough because I think it's a good tight end class. I think it's as good as the Laporte year. I just don't think the landing spots are as good as the Laporte year. So I think they're in a tough spot if you're a rookie tight end this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's 10 o'clock, gentlemen.
All right.
Any last questions before we go?
Well, just want to bring us in. We're in the college playoffs now. What do you make of anything coming with these next 2 games before next week's final?
I mean, I'm hoping just no injuries is what it really boils down to at this point.
Well, I mean, injuries happen as part of the game. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think I would love to see Notre Dame win. I know it's 10-10 right now against Penn State.
Yes.
I'd love to see Notre Dame win because I think having a good Notre Dame college football program is good for college football in terms of recruiting and kind of the viability of some of these other, I don't want to say smaller schools because Notre Dame is not a smaller school, but these, I guess, Midwestern schools. Your Michigans, your not Ohio State, but Michigan, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, like those schools, even Colorado now with the come up, like I want these non-SEC schools, I guess, to really start making the hay again. So I'm hoping Notre Dame wins.
Is more fun. More
good schools are better. I mean, I hate the SEC bias. I'm a Big Ten guy. I want the Big Ten to do well. So I think that's what I'm looking at in this game. So I'd love that. And then I think I would really like to see, I don't want to see Ohio State win, so give me Texas. A Texas Notre Dame final would be so old school classic, and I think it really does bring some more parity across the board, because I think we've always seen these Ohio States and SEC schools win, but I really want to see, a Texas Notre Dame because I think it just adds more clout and again just broadens the scope of parity across all of college football. So
okay.
Great, man.
Alrighty then.
I get the name of that set. I'm definitely going to check it out. It was great picking your brain and having you on.
Feel free to hit me up on Twitter if you guys got questions anytime. I'm always there to answer questions.
Thanks, Dustin, for coming on, man. Appreciate it. I'll talk to you on Twitter. Yep.
All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
Yep.
Good night, brother. Thank you.
What's up, ads?
Lou, do you want to go ahead and talk about your show before we get off?
All right. The Enhanced Sports Show rolls on Saturday, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Number is 512-543-4662. Mostly football because we're going to discuss we're going to recap the college football playoffs because by the time the show airs, they'll both be done. So it'll be a recap. Round 1 of the NFL playoffs. Black Monday review, or as they call it, you have been fired. As the coaches, coaching carousel is now taking effect, so it's gonna be that kind of edition. I don't know if I'm gonna get to all of them, but I'll do as many as I possibly can within a lot of time, of course. I'll try and get with the Pro Football Hall of Fame as the list is dwindling down. I didn't think I could do all 15 in one day and do the whole show, so I'm trying to wait until it breaks down so it doesn't take up the whole 2 hours. You get the idea. Of course, also NBA moves, NHL, UFC, and WWE wrestling, and all the other regular features. Your thoughts and comments this week in sports history, the feel-good story of the week, sports trivia, and if I can find anything ridiculous, I'll bring that up too. So, because sometimes the articles are a bit ridiculous. Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, and we'll also find out who might be a good candidate for the Jets coach because there's some pretty good names up there, including a former coach. But if you listen in on Saturday, you might find this list pretty interesting. All this and more on Saturday, 4 to 6 p.m. Remember, the number is 512-543-4662 for the Enhanced Sports Show.
Well, thanks again to these three gentlemen and Dustin coming on. You guys didn't hear much talking from me. I kind of just let you guys run the show. That's fine with me. That's cool with me.
Okay,
I was putting on my roommate's dinner, so that's why I stepped away for a little while. But I don't know if you guys noticed. I don't know if I showed you guys anything. But now I am VP of Operations for NGSC Sports. That was given to me on Saturday.
I saw that, yeah.
I did not see that.
Congratulations.
No.
Thank you. That will be more of me making decisions on the website moving forward. Yeah. So I'm going to be making some decisions. I gotta scout some.
We're all getting fired.
No. I'm actually trying to get. Hey Google, stop! I'm trying to actually get use the StreamYard on Ralph, so I don't have to. Not that I'm trying to be cheap. I don't have to pay anything. So we'll see how that works out. But guys, we'll be back here next week. See you three next week. Until then, this has been the Walker Report. I am the Sports Nerd. Peace.
Good night.
Princeton.
Good night, guys. See you later.